Welcome back to the Bourbon and BS podcast, everyone. This is episode 115. We have some very, very special guests here this evening, and I'm excited to have them on. I want to thank our sponsors. So the sponsors are going to be Tinder Box at Easton, and they're going to be providing our weekly featured cigar, and that is going to be the Nat Sherman Metropolitan Habano. And this is one of my favorite from the portfolio, and it also is part of their pack this week at Tinder Box at Easton. They have a stay-at-home sampler from Nat Sherman. So if you guys are looking for that, it would be here on your screen if you're looking at it live, or if you're on YouTube or Facebook after the fact. It's going to be the Nat Sherman stay-at-home sampler. You're going to get those 5 cigars, including the Nat Sherman Metropolitan Habano. I also have a Maduro here to follow up tonight. It's going to come with a free cutter, and also it puts you in a drawing for a lead crystal ashtray, which is a gorgeous piece. So that's going to be drawn on May 13th. But if you guys are interested in that, contact eastontinderbox@gmail.com and get your hands on that. It is going to be normally retail $45, and it's going to be $30 while we're staying at home in the state of Ohio. But we'll ship anywhere you want to. So that is going to be from that sponsor there, and also Altadis USA. We are going to be, I've got a couple in the garage as well, but since we have the Nat Sherman stay-at-home sampler, we're going to be featuring those cigars. Nate's got those as well, so we'll be smoking those. And Anne, I know you've got, I know you have the Habano, maybe the Maduro. Yes. And then also Altadis USA, yeah, like I said, they're going to be our featured sponsor, another year contract, which is fantastic, so we appreciate their support there. And also BS Cigar Company. BS Cigar Company has the 2 blends, BS Gold and BS Silver. And those are now in stock at Tinder Box at Easton. And now we are branching out as well with that sponsor. That BS Cigar Company is going to be featured at least one other shop here in Ohio, and then a handful more as we get through 2020. Hopefully, it's kind of been put on pause, much like everything else right now. A lot of the plans have been kind of halted for that. So BS Cigar Company, contact us at the podcast. You can contact Tinder Box at Easton at eastontinderbox@gmail.com as well. And then also the Patreon page, patreon.com/Bourbon and BS podcast. And that is going to be a way that you guys can contribute and also get on another thing that's been on pause, which is our swag as well. We're going to give that to our patrons. We've been trying to work on that. Again, one more thing that has been halted by the wonderful situation that we're in the whole world here. So we're getting through it. And I know we're getting through it together, which is our topic tonight, strength and community. I want to introduce the founder of Watershed Distillery, Greg Lehman. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. And we also have Anne Dimmick with Watershed. And please, Anne, your title, it's a lot. It's a lot going on in that title.
It's Greg.
What is your title? What is it?
You know? I don't know. It's actually kind of a funny story. Like the way the position actually came to be was like, well, this would be kind of cool, or maybe I could help with this, or what, so it's, but basically a big focus for me is our retail side of the business. So working with liquor agencies, which has become a bigger portion of what we're doing right now.
Right.
And then also working with some distributors outside of just Ohio.
Okay. What's on the business card?
Anne does a lot for us. When we started talking, it was one of those things where we knew we wanted her on the team, but we didn't know where. And so there was a lot of different things. So now I don't actually know what's on her business card.
If you have a business card, Anne, let's get that out of the way here first.
I do have a business card. It hasn't been reprinted since we changed the title. So it's the original title was retail and new business lead. And then the latest one is, I think, off-premise and distributor management.
It sounds very official. I can appreciate that.
When you work at a smaller company, a lot of people do a lot of things. And so it's kind of hard to just tie it up in neat little bows. It's like, well, this is kind of this person's niche.
I feel like a lot of times in a smaller business, you just put the name on it. That's it. That's it. Hi, I'm Anne with Watershed. Hi, I'm Greg. I'm with Watershed. What do you do there? Well, I do a little bit of everything.
Everything, right.
Yeah, that's how it works.
True.
That's how it works. And we have Nate Hale on as well tonight. He's going to be smoking that Metropolitan Habano as well. And we are drinking, which I'm excited about, Watershed Bourbon, along with some other things here. So does everyone have that bottle? This is how you do it remotely. You just get more bottles.
It helps with sales, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, and we thank you guys. Greg, are you? Did you crack that this evening?
You know what? Just this morning.
This morning, good.
Stay at home. You can drink all day, right?
That's exactly how it works. Thank you guys for helping us out and bringing those bottles to us. That's awesome. We wish you guys could have been in the garage, obviously, but obviously circumstances have changed, and I'm glad we were able to do this, though. And we also have something that I cracked yesterday that we will be talking about here a little bit later, the old-fashioned, which is interesting. I'm interested to talk to you guys about the concept of that and how you actually pulled it off, because that seems a pretty difficult task to have a ready-to-drink cocktail right out of the bottle and make it good and make it something that you don't have to just be like, once you crack, you got to drink it that night or it's going to go bad, that type of thing.
Right. I was super skeptical about that one. It's an interesting one to talk about.
I can imagine. So, like I said, we can get into this with the whiskey first. So Watershed Distillery, here's what I know, and I'm not going to go through. Anne was kind to brush me up on some notes here, but I'd like to hear it from you guys even more personally. But Watershed Distilleries, you guys you are celebrating your 10-year anniversary. Is that correct?
Yeah, we started in 2010,
right.
And we actually opened our doors. Well, started distilling in September. So in September, we'll hit 10 years.
Okay.
We sold our first bottles in December of 2010. So there's some 10-year marks that we're hitting this year that are kind of exciting. Hopefully we can have get-togethers at that point.
I think by September, hopefully you'll at least have a social distancing in-person party at least to do a 10-year anniversary. Did you guys, when you say you had your first bottles sold in 2010, and then my understanding is that you guys have never sourced your juice, right?
That's true. That's true.
So this was going on before?
No, we didn't sell. I'm sorry, we didn't sell whiskey in 2010. We didn't sell bourbon. Right. We make gin and vodka also, and so that's what we were selling.
That's how you started.
And that's what hit the market. And that year we were actually making bourbon, but it was just sitting in barrels in our warehouse.
Okay, so that was the beginning of that project for the bourbon side, So what all do you guys have the gin and vodka right under the Watershed name? So those three spirits, and then anything else that you guys are working on at all times, or is there other products that I'm missing here?
Well, on the gin side, we have our 4-peel gin, which is our original gin, and then we have a bourbon barrel aged version of that. So we have a 4-peel gin that sits in the bourbon barrel for a year, and then we have a more recent addition to the gin family. It's called Guild Gin, and the Guild Gin is finished. It's distilled just like our 4-peel with a little bit different botanical mix. But then after it comes off the still, we soak some chamomile in there, and so it's this really nice color and flavor from the chamomile. And so that's the third gin that we make. And then we also, you mentioned the old fashioned, so we have the bourbon and the old fashioned. We make an apple brandy. I thought I saw one of those bottles maybe behind Anne over there.
Apple brandy.
Yeah, so apple brandy is kind of like, it's not as common a product to hit the market, but I always describe it as it's not sweet, it's not sugary. It's like we made bourbon from apples.
Yeah.
So it gets some apple nuance, just like the bourbon would have some grain nuance, and then a lot of character from the barrel. But it's kind of, if you're a whiskey lover or a bourbon lover, you're gonna like an aged apple brandy. It's unique. It's great. It's got more of those fruity notes.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that we make that's really interesting is a Machino, which is a black walnut Italian liqueur. It's more like a dessert after dinner sipper, maybe with a cigar. Who knows? But it's
everything goes well with cigar. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's true. It balances this fine line between bitter and sweet, and it's got a lot of complex flavors in it. And that one's been fun.
So, all right, my first question is, I'm hearing this. So how are you picking these things? Are these just like interest piece? Is it someone says, "Hey, I bet you we can or can't do this," and you're like, "All right, well, hold my bourbon, hold my beer, let me start looking into this."
It's a little bit of all of the above. So part of it is, we have a still and we have a license, and so when we start out, it's like, well, we got to keep the lights on. What do people drink? Well, they drink vodka, they drink gin, they drink bourbon.
Sure.
And then you start realizing, well, we have a still and we have a license. Like, what can we do that's cool and different and exciting?
Yeah.
And so you start seeing, like, well, we grow a ton of apples here. I bet we could make some cool brandy. Or, actually the Machino is an interesting story. When we first put our distillery, you put your sign out front. People came in all the time, and it was like they would open up their jacket and be like, "Hey, look what I'm getting at home. This is what I'm getting at home." And and always the comment for us was, "Well, like, it's illegal to distill at home, right? But since you brought it in, let's try it. Come on, let's see."
Let me get a glass here. Hang on a second.
So then we would try this stuff, and there was a local guy, Charlie Tweel, and he brought in this Machino, and he had some Fennel and some other really cool stuff that he was making at home. And he didn't have a still. He was kind of taking vodka and soaking it, and that's more the process with these liqueurs. But his stuff was really, really good. And so, a lot of the stuff we came up with on our own, but the Machino in particular, he shared the recipe with us. And we were so busy at the beginning. When he came in, it was kind of like, that's great. This is amazing, but we just don't have the bandwidth to take it on.
Right.
And then one June, like, you can only make this stuff. There's a 2-week period of the year where the walnuts are just big enough, but the shell hasn't formed yet. So Charlie calls us and he's like, "Guys, come over to my house tonight. We're going to make Machino." And we're looking at our schedule and trying to think of every reason not to go, because we're like, dude, we're so busy. But we're like, you know what? Maybe we just go. Like, let's go see. It's good stuff. And so we went over and we picked walnuts in his yard, and then we went in and we cut them up and we made the recipe. And then we go down to his cellar, and because you pick them in June and then it's not ready till December. So we go down to his cellar and he's pulling out bottles from, all right, I made this last year. I made this a couple years ago. And we go up to his porch and we start tasting this stuff on his porch. And then he busts out, like, the Jenny's ice cream, and we're pouring it on Jenny's ice cream and eating it. And it's this, like, perfect June night. And so there's this moment there where Dave and I are like, okay, we're making Machino. This is amazing. Like, we want everyone.
It's going to happen at some point here.
Charlie's porch in June with ice cream and Machino and the whole thing. So, that story is interesting, but it's everything from that to, we love gin, we love bourbon, and we thought, well, what if we put gin in bourbon barrels? What does that mean? What does that do? And that's how that product got born. And it's kind of that, we have the license, and we, if the idea comes and we think it's interesting, we're going to try it. And we've done some stuff that's, at one point we were convinced that we were going to make vermouth, and we made a lot of really terrible vermouth, and we of course don't sell it.
Well, good. That's good. You kept that for yourself.
We didn't want to share it.
Thank you for that.
There's been other projects like that, but it's kind of. I think as we get further down the road on this thing, we think, how can we be more unique and different and bring some variety?
Well, where are you getting this education? I guess. I know I got some of those notes, but it kind of seemed like a strong left turn at some point here in your life.
It was.
Are you educating yourself from other people in the industry? Are you doing, people, this is one of those things, right? So, like, in the cigar industry and the whiskey industry, all this stuff, it's all the time. People are like, you know what I want to do? Like, what would be cool? I want to start a cigar company.
Cigars and whiskey.
Yeah. I want to start a distillery. I think that industry is going to take off here. And it's like, it did years ago. And right now you missed it. But it's like, what do you know about doing it? Everyone's like, well, I drink a lot, and I listen to podcasts. I've toured facilities, and it's like, well, clearly you know everything about this. So go ahead, man. Just take the leap and buy your building and do it all. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, where'd you start? That's a left turn in life, man. No,
it is. It totally is. And I don't have. So here's the deal. Here's the deal.
I love it when you start a story with, all right,
this is going to be good.
Here's the deal.
So what happened was,
and we get those all the time where people call in or they come in and they're like, hey, we were drinking last night. We came up with this plan. We're starting it. We see your success. And what I always tell people is, look, like don't quit your job yet. Write your business plan, try to raise the money, try to sell some product before you jump in. So my background is unique. I wasn't the guy that was like, hey, I'm out drinking and I love bourbon and I feel like I drink so much I should start making it to save myself money. Like, you know, you hear that, or you hear like we were at a party and we came up with this. No,
you hear that
us,
late in the evening a lot of the times too, by the way.
Yeah, totally.
You know what we should do?
Yes.
Arm around you.
It's a great idea.
And so my background was I loved small business and I really wanted to be more a part of the Columbus community. My job took me anywhere but Columbus. I was in the pork industry and I love the people in the pork industry, but every day I'd get in my car and I'd drive out of my hometown to where the pigs were and go meet with them. And so I felt like I was a little disconnected from where I was living and what I was doing. And so I met Dave Rigo at the time and we started looking at different ways to be involved in the community. And this is back in 2010. And in 2000, well, we started the project in 2008 or so. We started looking into this. And I remember 2009, we're looking at different things. And we loved the restaurant industry, but we're like, we're never going to open a restaurant because it's too risky.
It's too risky? Oh, you broke up a little bit.
Yeah, it's too risky. Yeah, we thought that there's way too much risk. You know, like we like small businesses and we wrote some business plans, but we're like, restaurants are too risky. We're too smart to open a restaurant. Clearly, I didn't learn anything because I have a restaurant.
I was going to say it.
Yeah. You can call me on it. And then two, we knew at the time because there were already 3 independent brewers in Columbus that brewing was way overplayed and that we didn't want to be a brewery because there were way too many on the market.
Like the craft brew industry was already.
Yeah. It was like you had Columbus Brewing Company and you had Barley's and you had Elevator and we're like saturated, done. There's not room for any more.
And then what happened? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So clearly we had the answers. But what we did have was there was nobody distilling in Columbus. And so when we came up with this idea to distill, we wrote this business plan and we were like, this is something that we're excited about. Like I loved gin, my business partner loved bourbon, and I liked bourbon too. And so it was like, this could be really cool. This could be fun. We didn't know how to distill and we didn't have any money. Two small hurdles. But,
yeah.
But here's the thing.
Everything was going smooth.
Right. But here's the thing that people don't think about. I think we looked at it and we said, distilling's not new. It's been around for a long, long time, and it's not rocket science. Like they were doing it a long time ago. They figured this out, and it's like, all right, if you heat this liquid up, the alcohol is going to boil out of it. And so it's like, I know there's a lot more to it than that to make good stuff, but we kind of looked at it and said, there's people that know how to do that part of it. Like, let's figure out, let's learn, let's hire the right people, let's get the right team involved so that we can make good stuff. But then the second part of it was, I think there's people out there that with money too. And I would tell you, I know there are now, but at the time we hadn't raised money before, but we thought, I think there's people out there with money that would be interested in doing something like this with us.
As far as investing into a company, the vision that you guys have at that point, right?
Right. And we got very fortunate with that side of it. And I don't know if we could do it again as easily if we went back in time and had to do it again. But we really got lucky. And it was one of those things where for us, we were just kind of messing around, having a ton of fun, writing a business plan in our vacation time, going to visit distilleries, learning how to distill.
Yeah.
And pretty soon we had this pretty tight plan, and we're like, well, we should talk to some guys about where we go to get investors. And we started talking to them, and people were saying like, hey, I'll put money on that. And it turned really quick from all of a sudden we had this fun project to we have all the money in the bank to start it. And we got to make a decision that means we're going to take all the money the investors gave us, send it over to Europe and buy a still, which means like I'm committing to leave my job as soon as I do that. Like, I mean, I didn't leave the next day, but I I'm going down the path, and it's going to happen because I got to pay these people back, and it means
take a second just to. There's two things out of that I kind of want to hit on here. Is that one, how surprised were you the first time someone's like, yeah, I'll put money in that.
I mean, it was crazy. It was kind of this thing of like, you know, we were talking with people that we knew. It was a group of people that we knew, but it was also like, hey, it wasn't, hey, come put money in this if you want. It was listen to our business plan and put punch holes in it so that when we go talk to like the real money people, we're tight with it. We got all the answers. And at the end of one of them, the guy was like, well, hey, if you can answer this question, I'd be interested in putting money in. And it was like, oh shit, of course, yes, here you go. And so then we were like, go do the research and like went back to him and said, here you go. And he presented a check, and we were kind of like, oh man, this is real.
Just got real, man.
Yeah, it got real. And then, you know, your energy level and your focus, and it just skyrockets. So that was
your nerves, by the way. The nerves, they also escalate a bit when it becomes real and not just talking about something.
It totally does. Yeah.
And so the follow up is how, when you made that decision, you're like, well, okay, now we have to do this. I can't work my full-time gig anymore. If I'm going to make this in like investment of other people's money that they're investing in not only like the idea, but obviously they're investing in you guys. I mean, that's a big aspect of it, is that people always talk about business plans and all this stuff. It's like, that's obviously the huge part. But I think even sometimes the bigger part, as long as that part is taken care of and you guys have everything checked off, like all the boxes for these people, but then it's like, well, who's actually going to be executing this business plan? And that's you guys. So, I mean, like what kind of, you know, that the nervousness and the change in life that you went through at that point, where it's like, okay, well, I got to put my 2 weeks in because I am going all in. Is that how it worked, or did you do both?
So, you know, I kind of got really lucky. Again, there was a lot of luck throughout this thing, but we went down the path of, we had the conversation with each other, like, all right, let's keep our jobs as long as we can. And as long as one of us has our jobs, we don't have to take money out of the company. And so we started working on Watershed, and we both had our day jobs, and we were both in outside sales. So we had some flex there.
Sure.
To the point of, at one point we have our space, so it's after September and we still have our day jobs, and we were like, let's make sure we have product on the market that we're selling and we got income coming in before we leave. And so there was one room in the middle of the distillery that was it was completely, there were no windows. It was quietest room in there. And, you know, we'd be working in the distillery and then look down and be like, shit, my boss is calling. And you'd run to the room and you'd get in there, like, don't turn on the forklift. And you'd be in there talking to your boss and, you know, trying to hustle and make it go. And we did our jobs really well. We were both really hard workers. And so we were able to keep it up. And then I got really fortunate in right at the end of 2010, my company restructured, and they wanted us to re-interview for our own jobs. They were going to roll some of the older people out of the organization, and so this was the way to do it. Well, I started reading the HR Handbook and realized, like, if I had to re-interview for my job, I could actually take a package and not re-interview. And so I called my boss and told him that basically I was given almost a year's worth of pay and benefits.
Wow.
To leave. And so it couldn't have worked out better for me. And I know you can't, I mean, I couldn't plan for that. It was just luck. And
that wasn't in the business plan.
No, but I would recommend everybody to write it into your business plan.
Hope for it.
But so, I mean, for me, that was kind of great. And so I transitioned out and was able to jump in full time. For Dave, it was a little bit different. I think it was about June of 2011 when he got the call from his boss, and his boss was like, look, man, you got to decide one or the other. And Dave's like, oh, all right, let's have a conversation.
It's an intimidating conversation, right? That's a big life change. It's impactful. I did have a couple questions here before we get into the bourbon here and talk a bit more with Anne and what her role is. Let's see. I had one. I got to scroll back. It was a while
Eric
back.
Black had a good one.
He did.
when you're gonna make something,
I'll bring
do
that
you
one.
make something to your taste, or do you try and make it to something you think is gonna sell? Yeah, there we go.
This is not a question for me.
You know what? We've done a little bit of both. When we first started out and we made 4PL gin, we brought together a bunch of focus groups, and we kind of had this idea of like, we're rookie at this. Let's get some people that really know to help influence us. And we made some great gins. And there was one that was a little bit more of a nutty gin that I really, really liked. And I loved 4PL, but it was my second. It was just below this other one. But everybody else loved 4PL in the focus groups. And they weren't just random focus groups. There were people that we trusted, and they were blind tasting our gins against some of the top gins. And so that really influenced our 4PL gin. But then things like our Machino and our Old Fashioned, when we made those, we went with recipes that we really liked as a team. And, you know, like our Machino keeps getting a little more bitter each year. We put less and less sugar in each year. The Old Fashioned, I think one of the reasons that drink is as popular as it is, we really downplay the sweetness to it. So you can have more than one, and you're not it's not so sweet. Whereas I think if you ask the general public, their initial thing would be they want sweeter, but they really don't. Like as they drink it and they have their second one, they're like, actually, this is great. Like I feel like 3 or 4, which, I mean, you want to drink it responsibly, but at the same time, you don't want to have one and it's so much sugar that you can't take it anymore.
No, and that's it. And you can always add. I mean, to something like that, when you have a premix like that, if you will, I hate calling it a premix because it's more than just that. I mean, it is a drink. I mean, it's not a premix like you think of like a margarita mix or something like that. I mean, this is out of the bottle, poured over ice. You're good to go. If you want to throw like a couple of nice cherries in there to get maybe a little bit more sweetness, let it kind of go in there. You can obviously do that if you want, but definitely it's different than that. There was another question here, just while we're talking about it, is something that is on a lot of people's minds. I've seen comments going through here. Is can we? I assume the answer right now is no. Can we come and tour their facility?
With what we have going on right now, it's not perfect to come through. We wish we could, but we can't. We're keeping just our people in there. But normally, yes, we have a full restaurant on site, and so come in, have some cocktails, have some dinner. But we also do tours. When the restaurant's open and it's life as we normally know it, I think we have tours Tuesday through Saturday, where they come in the evening and you can see the whole process. You can taste through the spirits. It's generally a pretty fun tour where you can see everything, and you go back in the barrel with the barrels, and you get to. It smells great in there because you have so much bourbon in one room, and you taste some spirit and. I feel like it still feels cool for me to be in there. So I think when you come through on tour and get there for the first time, it looks cool. And
yeah,
then obviously we take you around the stills and show you the whole distilling floor. And most nights there's stuff running in there. Usually Saturday it's quiet because the production team's not there on the weekend. But weeknights that place is usually humming.
It's hopping, huh? Yeah, when you say it's still hard for you guys to believe, like you say, Greg, and I feel like you feel the same way. I sometimes feel with the cigar industry, just even, being in the management, the retail side, it's like when people say, what do you do for a living? And you actually get to tell them what you're doing for a living. And you're like, yeah, I still can't believe it either type thing. You know what I mean? Like the people pay me to do this, it's
totally
shocking.
It's totally true. I walk through sometimes and I think that, and I also think like, when you see where you came from and, a tiny little still with a rack of 20 barrels and Dave and I wondering like, hey, are we going to be able to take a paycheck next month to and not that we're killing it now, but we have 1,500 barrels and we got a team of 50 people. Well, had a team of 50 people. Hopefully we'll have a team of 50 people again soon. But it's been a fun journey and it is such a cool thing to be there's days that I find myself doing tastings with the team, in the morning, and I'm trying to like control the tasting, and I'm like, oh man, I got stuff to do after this, like, and there's almost that little bit of like complaining in my head, and I'm like, no, forget that, I can't even think that way. I'm tasting whiskey and trying to figure out if this is good or not for the next batch. And I know there's so many people out there that would trade in a heartbeat, and it's all perspective. And
you're providing jobs as well, which is always nice. I mean, it's turning into a business for more than just you guys who initially got in on it, right? I mean, now you're growing that family, you're growing that community, which we can talk about as well. I wanted to switch gears a little bit before we get to the cigar. And you sent me all these notes, and I don't know if Greg saw these or not. But,
Greg has not seen all the notes.
No, I don't know. Did you type these up, or is this just something you have on file?
I typed them up this afternoon and emailed them to you. Like,
the most efficient guest ever. Like, it's amazing to have this. I need someone on the podcast crew to be able to do
all the dirt ahead of time. Here's the skeleton.
Yes. And one of my favorite parts of this is how you got into this industry. How did I end up in liquor? 10 years ago, I answered a Craigslist ad to do wine tastings in grocery stores. From there, someone figured out I knew how to use Excel and PowerPoint, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a background in mechanical engineering. You became a stay-at-home mom, landed in Central Ohio, and then you're like, all right, well, I'm time to get back out of the house a little bit. So I go on Craigslist and realize that you have an interest in this industry.
That's what engineers do. They just go on Craigslist. No,
I mean, like, how does that transition? Then you had a history, obviously, with a couple different distributors, right?
Actually, so it was a lot of it was with the marketing companies that represented the different brands.
Okay.
So, yeah, that was it. It was again during that 2009. So actually entering the industry at that point.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the downturn of the auto industry. So had a husband who wasn't working as much. And I'm like, oh, well, the kid's in school. Like, I could do this. This sounds fun, So I like wine. I could talk about it.
I like wine. I like drinking. This is cool.
I know. Like, it's fine. But it was really fun and got me out of the house. And Greg knows I love Excel more than any person probably should. So it was kind of a series of just different opportunities through the years, and people would just leave and they're like, oh, do you want to do this? And so I would. And it was one fun thing after another.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of, is this a real job? Like, wow, this is super fun. You get to meet so many great people, and you get to have so many great experiences, and it's just really fun. That's
so you say you like Excel more than anyone should. Are you an extremely organized person, I assume, at this point? Greg's already nodding his head. He's on video. I mean, so
yes.
I probably think I'm not that organized because I'm married to another engineer who's like, I'm in his garage right now, and everything has a place. And I'm not that one.
You're not that one.
Yeah, no.
But you like solving problems, and you like Excel. I like that.
I do.
So what is your role exactly? We talked about the position, what's on the business card, which needs to be updated or minimized going forward. We don't know exactly what that is, but what is your role with this? I mean, obviously we know, Greg has a bit of a story for the last 10 years, and before that we can talk about, but with you, I mean, obviously there's a lot more to just making a good product, right? I mean, we talked about the people side of it and the investment side of it from the beginning and growing something, but where do you step into the picture? I mean, you're fairly new with Watershed, correct?
I am. So
but with a lot of experience coming in the door.
Yes, I am actually not one of the people who makes it. I would love to claim that. So I'm part of the sales team, and I pretty much help out in all aspects of sales. And then I have a huge interest in marketing, brand, and everybody who knows me knows that I absolutely love aged spirits. And so that's just, I mean, I can geek out all day on, well, like at this proof, it brings out this, and we could do this, and we could, we can release this at this time of year. And wouldn't that be fun if we tied in this? So that's kind of what I do.
Well, and do you go around to like different tastings still? Because that's where I met you first, and when you were in town, I want to say it was probably about 2 years ago when Eddie Russell was in town over in Dublin. I met you for the first time over there, and you already have, at least in the Ohio area, I don't know how far the scope is, but I mean, you definitely have a name among especially bourbon drinkers, and I assume other spirits, but definitely the whiskey world, which is booming. Is that something that you're doing now, or is that involved? Are you still going out and about like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like in this area. So I loved my old job. Everybody knows I absolutely love the Russell family
Sure.
and bourbon and wild turkey and everything. I didn't absolutely love never being home, and so
Right.
it was kind of what precipitated this whole thing. But I have done some bourbon tastings in the area, still doing kind of Ohio wide.
Yeah.
But
How far is the scope of Watershed at this point? Obviously, Ohio, you guys have left a very strong mark. But I mean, how far? I mean, how many states are you guys in at this point? What's the expansion? I mean, where are we at right now? Because I know it's interesting. We had a question earlier about how you dealt with the state liquor agency, which is, I'm sure, for those that are really into the whiskey world and how things are distributed across the country, that is always a burning question. But I mean, as far as you guys, what's the scope? What's the footprint right now?
do you want to answer that one, Greg, or you want me to go with that?
Go for it.
I was going to say, so our biggest market by far is our home market, Ohio.
Yeah.
But we're also in Georgia. That would be our second biggest, and Michigan. We are in the Chicago area, so Illinois, New Jersey, New York, and Kentucky.
Wow.
Don't tell Kentucky.
how do you decide like what state you want to try and get into? How do you determine that? Like, where do you want to go next?
That's a big discussion that we're having right now, and it's honestly each state was a little bit different going along. It's kind of that which states are easy to do business in, where can we find a distributor that lines up with our values, and a distributor that we like to do business with. And honestly, at the beginning, it was a little bit of there was a guy in New York interested in us, and a guy in Atlanta interested in us, and Dave and I were kind of like, when it was just the two of us, we're like, oh man, it would be fun to go to New York City and sell stuff. It'd be fun to go to Atlanta and sell stuff. We should totally work with these guys. And so we are a little more sophisticated than that now. Anne brings a lot more to the table than just Dave and I going, oh man, Savannah, Georgia would be fun too. Like, let's totally sign up with these Georgia guys.
Yeah, it's pretty this time of the year. We should go down there and check it out.
Right, totally. So now, I mean, there is a lot more thought that goes into it, and we realize now how many resources it takes to go in a new market, and it's not just sign up with the distributor and let them go. So that's one thing Anne's working on right now, looking at over the next few years what markets we go in, and what's the strategy, and do we have enough money to, and how that works.
So let's get into this bourbon here. What are we drinking here? Because I'm coming to the end of my first glass here, so I didn't know if I need to pour another bourbon, if we're going to switch gears. I got a little ice out here for old fashioned. We got a couple of you say they're whiskey, I believe, but they just have numbers on the bottle, so I'm taking your word for it.
Oh, the secret stuff.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes.
I didn't let anything out. I mean, it's just I gave
no.
a little bit to Nate of each of them, but we got codes. I'll flash them. I won't. We don't want to give away anything here. There's some sort of code, but let's dive into the bourbon. So you said this was not the first product, obviously. I mean, we are the Bourbon and BS podcast. We've done some other spirits on here as well, other things other than bourbon itself, with other whiskeys as well. But with bourbon, I mean, I first of all, I mean, it's important for the business aspect, and it's important to some people to grab it off the shelf or to order it at a bar. But as far as the marketing and the bottle itself, I love what you guys have done. I mean, you're straightforward. I mean, it is, for those that are watching and not listening, but I will describe it. But it's a beautiful bottle, the shape of the bottle. You've got, first thing on there is just bourbon from Watershed Distillery. No fancy, marketing behind it. There's no real frills of age or clever, anything. It's literally just bourbon from Watershed.
That's right. That's right. You know what? And when we started, and I think it's a nod to Dave and I, and we kind of said, we're not fancy. We like really, really good stuff. We want to over deliver. It's almost like we kind of, and we described it as, we're Columbus, Ohio. We're not New York. We're not LA. We're not going to be like super high priced, really fancy, and you're not going to be wowed by what's inside. We're going to put what we are on the outside, and when you taste it, you're going to be like, wow, that's delicious. These guys over delivered. This is great. It's totally worth the price. I'm getting that every time. And so that was our thought, and I think our designer captured that in a way that it doesn't look simple. It just looks thoughtful. And so, yeah, I'm glad good to hear that you like it. At least the bottle, anyway.
Well, yeah.
I'm waiting for Steve to read the back label of it because Steve loves reading labels.
Yeah. No, I do like it because the front is very simple, and then I assume this is a font. This is not a handwritten note on the back, or am I wrong there?
You know what? It is our designer's handwriting that we turned into a font.
I love it. I mean, there's a brief story on the back, and it just talks about exactly kind of what you said. You started it years before, which is the way you do bourbon. It's done the right way. Are we dealing with the normal size barrels?
53-gallon barrels. Yep. Sort of standard barrel. Yep.
And you're aging this. Do we have an age? Do you release that at all, or?
Yeah, we do. So right now, what's in the bottle is right around 4 years old.
Yeah.
When we first released it, it was a 2-year-old product. And, every once in a while, someone will come up to me and they'll say, hey, I've got an unopened batch one. It's almost like a secret. I got an unopened batch one bourbon at home.
Yeah.
And I kind of lean in and I tell them right back, I'm like, leave it unopened. It's not as good as the stuff that we have out there right now. Just
try the new stuff.
Yeah. And so, there's a difference between a 2-year-old product and a 4-year-old product. And our whole strategy is put more away every year than we're taking out each year. And so then we get a little more age each year as we go. And so it's been I would have told you by year 10 that our bourbon was going to be 6 years old. Like, we're putting so much away that it'll be 6-year-old product. But the good news is we're selling more than we thought we would. And so it's a 4-year-old product still.
Yes, you're dipping in a little earlier than what you thought you might have to.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yep.
On the back of it, I do like also there is that personal feel, which is what I'm sensing more and more as I'm learning more about the Watershed, company, and what you guys are doing there is, it says cheers, P.S. or copper still is running more often than not. If you're in the neighborhood, stop in and say hello. So, I mean, you give it that kind of neighborhood feel, but this is all before you actually crack the bottle and pour it in a glass. I'm looking at this thing and I've said on this podcast, and there's no real offense to this, but, as people are getting into different spirits, especially bourbon, when you leave Kentucky, when you start going elsewhere in the last, probably I'd say 4 years, there's a lot of hesitation of buying things that you haven't heard of before. At least that's for me. And I feel like you guys, and I haven't even gotten into what we're talking about, what it tastes like, but what I will say about this one is that I've had many, and I know we've talked about it on the podcast in the past, where it comes from different states. And the more you read up on it, they're almost recreating the wheel. They're doing it in different methods because of where they're coming out of. They're doing smaller barrels. That's why I asked that question. They're doing shorter time periods. They're pressurizing things. They're doing things differently. And what, hearing what you're saying about how you guys did this, it actually really lines up to what is in the bottle. And that's what I think is so impressive with this, is that I don't want to say there's a right or wrong way. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that in the whiskey world that are very opinionated, just like any other industry. But I think anyone out there will be happy to know, if you have not tried Watershed, that it's not a recreation of how to make a new whiskey or a new bourbon. It is, like you said earlier in the episode, is that you learn from people. You figured out how this worked. You did tours. You did all this stuff because there's a passion there. I mean, and I think it comes across as soon as you pour it in a glass. I really do. I mean, you guys I read on the notes that Anne sent me is that, you started with your own grains, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, not many people can say that.
No, that's true. You know, there are plenty of people making it from their own grains, but there's people not as well. And you know, coming from the craft side of things and being in it so long, there's been this progression with the craft side. You know, you rewind to 2012, 13, 14, and there was a time when I was really hesitant to buy a craft bourbon if I saw a craft,
right?
Because you didn't know what you were going to get, and it might be great and it might be terrible. Like there really was a wide swing, and as our bourbon has gotten better over time as well, and I think it's a great product. It's an amazing product now. But I've seen just in general the industry grow up a little bit, and the quality of most of those other bottles is improving as well. And we keep talking like, you know, we think this industry is going to get better and better and better. And quality is just going to keep improving. So how do we stay out in front of that and keep our product? So if you taste our product next year and the year after, you're going, wow, these guys are still great. They keep, you know, wowing us with every batch that comes out. And so that's where we talk about how do we get better and better as this thing goes.
Now, there was a question there, and before we talk about this one, because you're talking about that, you already mentioned the 6 years that you were shooting for, but then had to keep it at that 4-year ballpark. You know, do you have any limited release bottles on the future menu or longer aged bourbons than the 4 years? So, you know, I don't want to get ahead. I'm not assuming anything, but when you talk about that, you had it in the playbook at that point, right? You know, you were thinking we might have a 6-year. Is there, I mean, Dustin's asking, is there plans or a thought even? And
yeah,
I don't want to release any secrets here or anything like that.
Yeah, no, it's a fair good question. We get that question a lot. And when we started the company, we had this idea that our bourbon is our bourbon. So, you know, we're not complicated people. It's simple. And we're like, our bourbon is our bourbon. We're going to get it better and better and better. We're not going to do any single releases, and it's just getting better and better. But you know, as we've moved through this thing, we've found that there's creativity that comes into it. And so we released an apple brandy a couple years ago, and when we did that, we were sitting around and we're like, all right, we got these great empty apple brandy barrels. Let's take some of our 4-year-old bourbon and fill those apple brandy barrels. And so that product is now over 6 years old, and we are excited at some point to release that product into the marketplace.
Sharing that with people.
Yeah, and that will be a fun one. We do have a birthday coming up, and it's possible that those might line up. We'll see if we can do anything, if we're allowed to get together, but hopefully we are, because that'll be a fun one.
Oh, absolutely.
And then what you have here, the little bottles, we'll talk about that in a little bit too. That's something even different, which is kind of exciting too. I don't know if you want to try that now. And I know you're the mastermind here. You tell me.
And what do you think?
Yeah.
I would say let's try this now. But
All right. Well, I got two numbers here. I got 372 and 362. What do we? And I got plenty of glasses for everything. I
have 373.
37. So
I think it's the same. I think it's the same stuff, just different barrels. Is that?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So we actually all have different barrels, but the same concept.
Same concept. So, Anne, you picked these. So
I didn't. Well,
no, you didn't pick. You shared it. We lost Nate here for a second. I don't know if he lost his feed, but what should I? Is there a preference? Because Nate and I both have 362 and 372. Is there one to have over the other?
Not necessarily, but if you have two glasses, it might be interesting to try the two side by side.
All right, I'm going to try not to confuse myself, which is easier said than done. Because
I would say probably like my favorite moment in bourbon, my watershed moment in bourbon was my very first barrel pick down at Wild Turkey.
Okay.
And you're in this brick house that was built in the 1800s, and you're thieving it. Eddie Russell is thieving it straight out of a barrel into a glass. And I mean, just the smells and it's an amazing experience. And then being able to try different barrels of bourbon next to each other and realizing that they have so much personality. You can have 2 barrels that were even from the same batch of distillate that were filled on the same day,
Right.
that can be aged in the same rick house and have a completely different flavor profile several years later. So I would expect that your 2 barrels are actually going to taste a little bit different. So it's
We had a story that was way back on the podcast that was actually very, very similar to what you're saying, and I remember learning about it. And it was 2 barrel picks, and I'm not going to say the company because I mean I could, but but it was the story that I heard was they were sitting next to each other in the rick house, right? And they thought like, all right, so this one's going to be this, and this one's going to be this, and this was like going into it. They literally tasted it, and they're like, nope. And they just like basically like in my mind, I'm picturing like they have these 2 stickers for bottles, which is not how it works by any means, right? I mean, they're probably just writing or whatever, but I'm thinking like they were about to put stickers on a bottle and they're like, no, hang on a second. And they just like flipped them and like, this is more accurate or what we think this actually tastes like.
Yeah.
So 362 is what I'm going to sip on here first.
I have 373.
All right. Greg,
I have 346.
All right.
So, Anne, do you want to tell them what this is? So this is something we haven't even described yet. I don't know.
We haven't even gone into what the original bourbon tastes like yet. This is how the podcast sometimes works.
Right. So
We're not doing a good job of selling this stuff.
No.
Okay.
I've already said people are they're going to be very, very pleased if they have not had Watershed yet.
I would say, so Watershed for me.
We're going back to the original bourbon?
Yes, the original bourbon.
Let's set this down then.
And this is the first time I've ever had batch 99, which I'm a big fan of. What do you have at your house right now, Greg?
I've got 97.
You got 97. I have 87.
Okay.
I have 99. Sorry, guys. It's good.
So let's talk about that. So these are small batches. Is that what you'd classify these as?
Oh, very much.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the larger producers.
Right.
So,
right.
And it's a.
So even when people are looking at this, I mean, you go for consistency, I imagine, from batch to batch when it's just your I don't want to say your typical, but the bottle that says bourbon by Watershed, you're going for a somewhat consistent flavor. So when someone grabs that bottle, they're not going to be blown away like, oh, like I bought this 2 months ago. Now this bottle is completely different. Is that accurate or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But
It is, but I think also with a small craft distillery, you get a little more variation over time. But what we notice is the bigger we get, the bigger the batch is, the more consistency there is. So when we were small, we were dumping 4 barrels at a time, and then 4 more barrels, and then 4 more barrels.
Yeah,
there was a lot of variety. I mean, you think about the difference between one barrel compared to the next, like what Anne was talking about. Batch 100 that they're drinking, that's the single barrel.
I'm showing these for people that are listening.
That was the good batch there.
Good one.
Everyone out there is like batch 93. I got batch 100 over here. I got batch 94.
Yeah.
See, I love this.
That's cool. So when it was 4 barrels at a time, there was a lot of variety. But now when we're dumping 15 barrels, and we've put together a more sophisticated tasting panel where it's not just me tasting the barrels. We got a whole group of people tasting and picking and pulling those barrels. And so when you get that, you get a lot more consistency, and it's been cool to see that progression, which I think adds to the quality of the product.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So, Anne, describe what you got out of this, since this is your forte, I'd imagine here.
I don't know if it's my forte, but
based on my experience meeting you in the past, I mean, it's definitely maybe it's not your only forte, but it is in your forte list, I'd say.
Out of our bourbon, I would say the predominant flavors that are common across all of the batches are definitely a lot of dark cherry and oak on the nose. And then it is a non-chill filtered small batch bourbon. So it is a really flavorful bourbon and a finish that goes on forever. Lots of like warm winter baking spices. I mean, it's a great sipper by itself. It makes amazing cocktails.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah, but it's a great sipper.
There is like that warm spice. I do like about that. This is one of the bourbons that I get a little sweetness at the end, at least for me. The finish. Yeah, it's got this. I always describe it. So my thing is I'm not always the big person to be like, all right, it's these notes. I read a review. Well, actually, it was about the cigar that we're smoking here, the Nat Sherman Metropolitan Habano, and someone said like the first note they put was soggy chocolate chip cookie as a flavor. And I never dive into these very unique experiences that some people, I'm sure you've read reviews on your own stuff, and you're just like, really? I'm not getting that. I also don't understand how you would know this flavor, but all right, that's fine.
Right.
Whatever you think. If you like it, that's the big thing. But there's a lot of food flavors in this one, which is nice. Yeah. And you said it's a 5 grain. Is that correct?
It's a 5 grain. It looks a lot like a high rye.
Is it? Yeah.
That's more, if you're looking for a more flavorful bourbon, it's going to be more appealing to somebody who really wants a really flavorful bourbon.
And you're sitting at, is it always 90 proof? Is that correct? Is it dependent on batch, or is it always 90 proof?
Always 90 proof.
Okay. Yeah. Which I think, there's no real heat. That's the one thing I'll say about this is that when people talk about, you get up to like the 100, 100 or so, people talk about basically, it's like, it's got a little burn. Nothing. In my opinion. There's that warm spice, and then that's where it stops on that, which is, it does. And you said it, it's an easy sipper for sure. It'll warm you up, but it also won't like sit you back in your chair and say, you got heartburn for a little while and it's sitting down here. But
it's not always a bad thing either. But
no, I think I agree. I'm all for, barrel proof, cask strength, all that stuff. Absolutely, I am. But as far as like a daily sipper, something that I can keep going back to, it's something where it's like you don't want anything. For me, I don't want anything too light. I'm not always in the mood for a barrel proof. I think that's a big trend right now in the bourbon and the whiskey world, is that a lot of the people that are out there buying bottles and collecting bottles and all this stuff. And we saw it in the cigar world too, is that it was just, how strong can we make this stuff that people are still going to buy it and drink it? And now we've seen some more people, myself included, started going back down to like more medium bodied cigars, more, that's the way I am with the whiskeys too, is that, I love the barrel stuff. Yeah, I do. I like trying it, but it's not necessarily that I want to go to that every day, and that's where I think this falls in. And you look hesitant. I feel like you're a barrel strength.
I really like barrel strength.
Yeah, I can see it in your face.
Yes.
Greg's probably laughing. This is like the everyday conversation.
Yeah. you want a Watershed barrel strength, don't you?
Yeah. I didn't put him up to that, Greg, either.
No, not at all. It's not in the notes.
We're close.
I'll show you the notes afterwards if needed.
But
all right, so let's go.
Of barrel strength.
So 362 is what I'm reading. All right, so let's get into these.
So we have this. So I almost get a black walnut off the nose of this one.
Oh, is that a fact? This definitely is stronger.
Yeah.
And you said these are all the same concept, correct?
Same concept. So here's the hint. It's actually our barrel proof bourbon.
Okay.
That's finished in a barrel that aged one of our other award-winning products.
You said what fruit did you say?
I said it kind of tastes like black walnut.
Black walnut. I'm getting some cherry.
Yeah, so this what
Greg can't tell you, he wants to talk about it.
I'll just jump in. I'll tell you what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is this?
This is bourbon that is finished in our Machino barrels.
Yeah, Dustin out there guessed that, by the way.
Nice. We dumped the Machino, put bourbon in, and every year for the past few years we've done a Machino Fest. And so the idea this year is to release some bottles of this at Machino Fest, which should be pretty fun. And of course, Anne wants it to be, what proof do you want it to be, Anne?
The whole proof, whatever.
The whole proof. All of it.
Single barrel, full proof, all of it.
Yeah.
So start calling it the all it proof.
Yeah, all it proof. No, I'm just a big fan of everybody being able to taste variation.
Right.
And I love when a regular consumer, you don't have to know Eddie Russell. You don't have to, have an in at this distillery, and you can actually get something just at your local store and be like, oh, I found this barrel here and this one here. And I mean, for me, that's the fun of bourbon, is to be able to taste different things. And, well, what do you get out of this?
No, I can get that.
That's what makes it fun.
So you gave us two different ones. So you said these are basically different variations of the same overall concept, correct?
They're two different barrels of bourbon aged in two different barrels that finish Machino.
It is definitely different.
Yeah.
That one's sweeter. 372. I mean, if that means anything to you guys, 372 is definitely sweeter. So this is what you guys are working on. So this is, you have all these different concepts or different barrels doing this. So are you guys, is this the choosing phase of what you do first, which barrel, or how does this work?
Well, it's basically, we put some really good bourbon in the Machino barrels because we took a gamble saying, like, we love bourbon and we love Machino, and we think they're going to get amazing together.
Yeah.
So we have a good deal of this put away, and the thought is, as we get closer to Machino Fest, we'll pick our favorite ones and bottle those and put them in it'll be a little bit different bottle so that you know what it is, and and just share it, and hopefully people like it. This is one of those that, as we taste the barrels, I mean, I love this product. I think it's delicious. I think the finish on it's amazing. You get some of those walnut flavors coming through, which blend. I think it goes so well with bourbon and with oak and with the dark cherry flavors and our typical bourbon. And so I think people will be excited about it. And I think if we offer it at a barrel strength or a little bit higher proof, I think the bourbon lovers, the bourbon nerds out there, the whiskey nerds, they'll get excited about it too. And if you just want a good bourbon to sip, you can come get it, and you can put it on ice and water it down a little bit.
What proof are these at? Did you say that? What proof these are at, or do we know?
They're probably close to 118, 120, somewhere in there. Maybe a little bit higher, just because it tends to concentrate in barrels. So it could be that it's in the 120s, but 118 to 124, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, they're not light.
Yeah, no, it's
but that's
good.
Here's the thing I'll say, and we got Nate back on the feed, which is nice. Hey, hello, Nate. Welcome back. Can we hear you? Just test your mic there. Yeah, I can't hear him, but we can see him. So for those on audio, he's probably saying some great things that we just can't hear. But I will say that between the two of these, and I don't know if you've tried all the different ones, it's that 362 I drank first is more like a barrel strength whiskey. It's got that heat. It's got a lot of spice, in my opinion, but probably a lot of heat. But it reminds me more of a kind of like a barrel strength, either bourbon or even like a little bit more rye to it, in my opinion.
I got catching up to do.
Yeah, you got, Nate, welcome back. Now we got you. The 372 though, it almost has more of like a port finish. And maybe that's just more of that kind of the berry that I'm getting from that, but the finish is a lot different for me. So the two barrels, and I envy you guys for being able to try all these things, but I don't necessarily envy the pressure that I would put on myself of which one do we bottle up and which one do we actually release, because I like, and I don't know if you have, how many, but obviously we have a bunch of different ones here. So how many different iterations do you have of this?
Pretty small.
Yeah, it's small. We got 4 barrels here.
There's 4.
Represented
here tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a few more than 4 in there. I'd have to go back and look at the records, but each year we'd probably put maybe 6. There's not many. There's only a few of them.
It's got to be a tough decision, though. I mean,
it will be tough. Yeah, it'll be tough. But as you're saying that, I'm like reaching over here, taking notes on what people think. I'm like, all right, well,
put my opinion way at the bottom, okay?
Yeah, well, but like hearing that,
you got Excel pulled up here.
Yeah. No, I'm always interested in what people think, and my favorite part of the tour is, and for those who are listening now, I'm going to ruin it. Close to the end of the tour, I always kind of lean in and say, "Hey, anyone want to go to the back and we'll crack open a couple barrels and try some stuff right out of the barrel." And people love that, but it's also a chance for me to taste some different barrels back there and see what people think. Like, hey, what do you think of this product? Is it good? What do you think of barrel 372? What do you think of barrel 362? And then it's you start to formulate some opinions and see how people react. And what's amazing when my taste and their taste align, and that's when it's like, we love this barrel and I love that barrel. Then it's easy, and it's like, all right, 372 it is. Let's go.
Yeah, no, I think you're as people say way too often, I think, in an overall life, when you ask them how they're doing, they say, I'm living the dream. I mean, you can actually say that. And I don't need to ask if it's a nightmare or a good dream, because it sounds like it's pretty amazing right now, all things considered. And the fact that you can have, and the fact that you put the company out there in a sense, and put yourself out there of people that are interested and they're in the tour. And it's like you have a focus group right there anytime anyone's walking through there. And absolutely, like Dustin, who's a part of the podcast, he's at home. He's kind of being very vocal on the feed here, and he's just saying yes. So I assume anyone listening to this that is in the area or coming to the area, you will have some very, very full tours, more than you may have ever had before, as soon as people start getting out of the house. So Nate says that he prefers 372. So
all right.
I'm 362. So that's what I'm saying. I would not want your guys' position where you have to figure out which one you do.
You gotta decide. Yeah.
No, there's just a smoothness as soon as 372 hit my palate. Just a smoothness that, like, it has a thicker viscosity to it that just coats my palate, and it makes it come across my palate smoother than the 362 did.
Mm-hmm.
So I said with the
362 tasted hotter.
Yeah. I said the 372 almost has like a port finish, though, for me.
I have 373, and it's like oatmeal raisin cookie.
It sounds delicious.
It's just
that sounds like a 3-year Willet.
Yeah, sounds like a ride. Well, so all right, so I had Amy, who has been a previous guest on here. She made a great point. She actually owns McClellan's Pub in Dublin. Anne, you're smiling like you know Amy. Love that this great distillery is right in our backyard. You can't see it, but to my left, you can see just the corner of it. I have a barrel head that she left here when she was on the podcast that I have yet to return to her. So, Amy, I'm sorry. I will bring it over as soon as things open back up, because it is a beautiful barrel head that you guys can't see the whole thing. Let's shift gears for the end of part one here and touch, at least for those that are interested in the cigar side of things. So, I knew this was going to happen, and that's what I told Nate beforehand, is that if we started with cigars, we don't know how long we would go because we don't know what the questions are. But with this, we wanted to focus on your guys' great product and company. And we appreciate you guys being a part of the podcast. I know even with all things considered right now going on in this world and in the state of Ohio, and obviously much more broader scope, you guys are still very busy. And we haven't even touched on what you guys are doing. We talked about the hand sanitizer a bit, but there are people that are in my opinion, that are much more busy right now. So we appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedule to do this. But Anne, I want to go to you here, since Greg's not smoking at the moment. He says, allergies, which I can completely understand, because I am also, I have those as well. But Anne, are you lighting back up? Are you not lighting back up? Where are we at here?
I'm going to do it during the intermission.
Okay.
Not on camera.
So the Nat Sherman Metropolitan Habano, the reason we're doing this one is not only is it a great cigar, but Nat Sherman has a lot of history, and they started years and years ago, and they've had an interesting history. They still operate the Nat Sherman Townhouse in New York, and that is kind of their focal point as far as their operation as a brand. And we have Kylie, who was on my Tasty Tuesday last night, and we're doing that special I mentioned earlier on in the podcast. And this is a medium body cigar. there's a lot of reasons that I like this one. They don't release a whole lot of information as far as the blend, and kind of like you guys, you talk about the grain, but you don't necessarily on the bottle say percentages or, how much and everything. And I don't know if you guys release that, but Nat Sherman doesn't do that a whole lot at all, especially with this, but it is done out of the Plasencia factory. And for Greg and Anne, that you guys don't know this and you don't listen every week, one of the things that we have, Plasencia has been just growing and growing, and they're a big manufacturer, and they farm, and they are based out of Nicaragua as well as Honduras. And it's something that I find interesting, because one of the things that we have in the synergy of the Bourbon and BS podcast, the Tinder Box and BS Cigar Company, is that we recently just reblended the BS Gold, and we used the Plasencia factory as well, which Nate's holding up right there. So there are a lot of things that Plasencia is doing absolutely right. So Nat Sherman uses mainly, to my knowledge, not only Plasencia, but also Quesada for a lot of their Dominican blends. This one's more recent. This was brought out in 2017 at the trade show. So just like I'm sure the bourbon world and the spirit world has trade shows that you may or may not want to go to, because you want to go to it, but then you have to figure out how you can actually get out of your distillery and leave work for a few days.
Right.
But the cigar world has much the same. And this one was brought out when a lot of people were not bringing stuff out, because the FDA regulations were coming through for the cigar industry based on the Tobacco Act of 2009 that was revised in 2015. It was a big thing for the cigar industry, but they came out with this, and it's a Nicaraguan Puro. And the reason I picked this cigar this week is because this thing goes with almost anything. It's a medium body cigar with a ton of flavor, but it's one of those cigars that I feel like you can smoke with, when it comes to whiskeys especially. You can smoke it with a 90 proof bourbon. You can smoke it with a barrel proof. You can smoke it with a rye. You can smoke it with, basically all across the board. This thing is going to not necessarily complement 100% anything you're drinking, but it won't overpower, and it won't be overpowered. So there's a little bit, it was interesting to see how it paired up with the Watershed. Nate, what do you think of the pairing on this cigar and the bourbon, since you're the one smoking with me here?
I think it's absolutely fantastic pairing, because when I first light up the Metropolitan Habano, I get a little sweetness on the first, and I think that sweetness just goes very, very well with the Watershed bourbon, because at 90 proof, it's obviously not down at 80, but it's got just a little bit to it. But it doesn't taste hot. It's got a nice sweetness on the back end of it, almost like a brown sugar sweetness to it. Not a whole lot of oak notes that I get, just a nice, well-rounded sweetness. And I think with this cigar, which is my second favorite Nat Sherman, I think the sweetness that I get off of this, plus with it being a medium body, they just go together absolutely fantastically well.
So, Anne, you said you were going to have some questions about the cigar side of things. So let's take a moment here on this. So Anne, I certainly don't want to embarrass you in any way here, but it was interesting because I know you've been. And Greg, do you smoke cigars on the regular or occasionally?
Occasionally, I wouldn't say on the regular.
Okay, we can fix that, but
yeah, I gotta figure it out.
He knows the guy.
But Anne was she's been around it obviously before, but she was sending me like a link of how to, hey, I'm looking this stuff up, because it is something, that there's a little bit with making cocktails in the spirit world. There's a lot of art that goes into it. You can look up recipes, but you go into a certain bar and they do it a certain way, and it tastes different, right? And you pick which spirit to go in there, and it's not just put a bourbon in there. It's certain bourbons go better in certain cocktails. And so with the cigars, it's almost like for someone walking in the door, and it can be a little intimidating because you don't know exactly, how do I cut it? How do I light it? How do I, we get those questions all the time in the cigar world. And it's once you figure it out, it takes a little bit of practice, but the biggest part is that there are a couple of guidelines as far as where to cut it. Don't cut it too far down, those types of things, how to light it, make sure you light the entire foot. But once you get into it, the biggest thing is obviously don't inhale, because that's going to be a little bit too much because it's 100% tobacco smoke as opposed to having a filter on it with cigarettes and such. But this cigar, I felt very comfortable giving it to both of you guys because it is of that nature of almost like a good starter whiskey where you don't want to give someone a whiskey where it's going to just be you don't want to give a barrel proof to someone that's never had whiskey before, unless you just want to mess with them. If you want to mess with them, then you can do that. But I mean, typically you're not going to want to do that. You also don't want to waste the good stuff on them the first time around. So with this cigar, I knew that this is, at the price point around $8 to $9 for this cigar, and to have it smoked the way it does, and the overall flavor that you're getting from it. And Nate was just going into it. Retro hail for you guys, if you're watching us smoke, this is a cigar that for those that retro hail, which is basically, as Nate's doing right now, basically pushing that smoke through your nasal cavity, never inhaling, but you actually you kind of exhale, if you will, or blow out through your nose a little bit as you're doing that. And as you know, with drinking, if you guys like, wine's a big one that when you're drinking, you kind of inhale a little bit with your nose. You know what I mean? You guys ever breathe in as you're drinking? Because you're getting a little bit of that the capacity of what you're able to taste through your nasal cavity. That's what we're doing with the cigar. And so it's something that this cigar has always been since it came out a couple years back. Something that I knew that would go well with whatever you guys, when Anne was mentioning these maybe surprises and stuff like that. I didn't want to ruin the surprises with a super mild cigar or super bold and spicy cigar. And I think that's where this Nat Sherman Metropolitan Habano falls in. Nate, would you agree? Nate?
Yes. Sorry, there was it cut out just a little bit. No, this is it's interesting about this cigar because when I think about the cigar, I was thinking about it earlier today. There's nothing about this cigar that just absolutely astounds me. It's just a very solid cigar. It smokes well. It's got a great flavor. Medium body. I believe it's all Nicaraguan. Nicaraguan Habano wrapper.
It is.
But it's got a great flavor to it. It burns very well. I remember on the community page the other day, someone had asked the question, because I don't think they were local, if they can't get any BS Gold, what are some cigars that you recommend?
Right.
And I think Jake was the first person that commented on that post, and he rattled off like half a dozen cigars. But one of the cigars he didn't mention that I did mention was the Nat Sherman Habano.
Yeah.
Because just the medium body, it's very well balanced. On the retro hail, you get just a little bit of a white pepper to it, but it's not an overpowering spice. Like, it's not a spice that's going to cleanse your palate or clean your sinuses out.
It's not going to make you sneeze.
No, it's a very pleasant cigar. The times that I find myself smoking it in the shop, like, I'll sit there and I'll go up and down the wall of the humidor just looking for something that just stands out. Like, I want a cigar that just stands out, and I'm looking, I'm like, you know what? I'm not feeling any of those. You know what? I do like this Habano. I'll just smoke that. And usually that's the cigar I pay for. I don't use that as my shifty. I'll gladly pay, $9 plus my staff discount for this cigar any day. Because, one of the comments earlier is someone had said that Nat Sherman cigars tend to be just very medium. I don't think $9 for a Toro is expensive by any means.
No,
I think we have this at $8.95 at the shop. Yeah,
that's right.
So $8.95 for this Toro right here, and I smoked this, or I lit it up right before we started. So here I am, almost an hour and 20 minutes in, and I still got that much of the cigar left. Like, it burns very well. It's got a great flavor. It's an all-around good cigar. There's nothing like a Padron 26 that's going to stand out, or a Liga Privada that's going to stand out for you like this one. It's just an everyday, really good cigar.
Yeah, I would call this, to equate back to what we were saying about the Watershed Bourbon, is that this is the equivalent to like an everyday sipper. Right. This is something that you can go to if you're smoking cigars. You're like, I don't know what I'm in the mood for. Like Nate's saying, I think that's how I would I'd relate to what we were talking about with the whiskey world and spirit world, is that this is your everyday sipper. It's something that you can go to on a you can have it as a nightcap, you can have it on a Sunday fun day, you can everywhere in between, right? I'm not going to encourage drinking in the morning, but if you do that, you could probably have this cigar and this bourbon, before noon, if that's what you're doing with your life, which is fine, and we all do it sometimes. And if you say different, you're probably lying. But I would say this is your everyday sipper of the cigar world. So, do you guys, Greg and Anne, do you guys have any questions about this while you're on? I don't want to put you on the spot. You can say no, but I mean, while you guys are sitting back and not smoking and hearing us talk about this.
Well, actually, no, I liked your explanation quite a bit. And in watching like the other podcasts, because I do tune in pretty regularly, when one of your cigar makers actually talked about like how they're packing the cigar differently so that the first, inhale was going to be this flavor profile. And then as it developed, it would go into this and this. That was super interesting. It was like, oh, so I definitely want to select based on this nose. It's a lot like bourbon.
Very much so.
It really is. And, you want the first impression to be this, and then you want the finish to be this. So
yeah. And I mean, there's obviously the different tobaccos you're using. So, I mean, in a nutshell, what you're dealing with is just for those that are more into it, obviously people tuning in for the Watershed part of this is they may not all be cigar smokers, but the interesting part about cigars for me is that, again, it's 100% tobacco. So the major three components is the wrapper leaf, which is what you see on the outside, and below that is the binder leaf, which is, and sometimes you can have double binders, and that's what keeps the filler together, which is what you see at the foot of the cigar, and that's the majority of the cigar is the filler combo. And there's a few different ways you can bunch the filler, but there are the two major ones, just for I guess for the conversation, is it's all like the higher end, the premium cigars are going to be long filler, which means the cigar has the filler as they either do typically an accordion style, where you take the leaf, the tobacco leaf, or the filler, and you basically just kind of fold it together, like push it together naturally, right? And there's also something called the entubado roll, which is going to be, they're literally taking those filler leaves and they're rolling it into, if you imagine, like mini straws, right? And then they take those, they roll each individual leaf, and then they bunch those together, which is more of the classic Cuban style of doing things, going back in the history there. And then once you have that, you roll it into the binder leaf, you put it in a mold, and then you wrap it with the wrapper leaf. But with the long filler, what you were referring to, Anne, is that if you want to have a little bit more, and I think you were listening to the Eric Espinosa one a couple weeks ago when he was describing that, is that you when you have that, everyone thinks long filler and that's it, but you have gaps, right? So there is an art form to this rolling style, just like there is with the distilling and doing the things that you guys are doing with the grain and the ingredients of this thing. Is once you even have that, there is that extra step to fill it in. So as you take that, you'll break off the end of what's hanging out of the foot. And each of those aspects of the blend, so there's the typical, and I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but you have like the Viso, you have the Seco, and the Ligero. And the higher up you go, you're going to get more strength on the tobacco, typically. So they have that in the mix. And so if they want to have a little bit more of an oomph at the light, when you're taking those broken off tobaccos, then you'll place that in a strategic way for that particular blend, so that you'll get a little bit of complexity from that cigar as you're smoking it, including what you're referring to is that at the foot, you'll get a little bit more of a pop or a little bit more pepper. But it is much like whiskey, I'd say, because even if you have a peppery or a stronger cigar, much like when you were talking about the old fashions earlier, Greg, it's the fact that your first couple puffs, you're going to get a lot of that pepper and flavor. But on your second or third glass, some of the heat, even on the higher proof stuff, it'll start kind of going away. And you're like, well, it's going down a lot easier. It's not because you're just getting a a bit tipsy, possibly. It's because your palate's getting used to it.
I found that out today with the old fashioned, because my wife was interested in trying the old fashioned, and I poured her a little bit of it, and she sipped it. And she goes, "Yeah, I actually enjoy that." And then she just sat it down for 5-10 minutes, and then she took another sip. And as she let it sit, and had oxygen and air introduced to it just by sitting there, like as time went on, she actually enjoyed the old fashioned a little bit more each time.
Yeah. Did she have ice in it?
About halfway through, I went and put a Death Star ice cube in the glass.
Of course, Death Star.
And ice cubes. And all I did with that when I had her try it with that, all the ice did was it took off a little bit of the heat and a little bit of the burn from that you get from the whiskey that's in it. And even when I drank it, like, yes, it takes away a little bit of the burn, but I still get the citrus notes and I still get the bitters notes from that old fashioned. You know, whether it's got an ice cube in it or doesn't have an ice cube in it, I still taste the citrus and the bitters. It's just that adding an ice cube to it just kind of tones down that heat just a little bit.
I like it with ice in there. I like the progression as the ice melts and it changes the flavor. Like for me, that's part of drinking the old fashioned. And I always notice like my consumption rate kind of picks up speed as I get to the end of the glass because the proof goes down and I've had a couple sips and then and then glass 2 continues to pick up a little bit of speed, but that's my own problem, I guess.
Yeah, my issue with drinking old fashions and cocktails, especially when I'm out at the bar, is that you got about like this much left of the cocktail and the water. The ice is starting to melt a little bit, and my typical move is as I'm walking back up, or if the server's coming back over, or now that I have this in my house, it's definitely trouble because as soon as that starts happening, you kind of just bottoms up it.
Down it.
Yeah, you get down the last little bit, you kick back, and then it's like one movement, you set it back down on the bar, and you're like, yeah, I'll do one more.
Very nice.
Yeah, you guys created a monster with that old fashioned. I will say that is very good to have. And again, I think I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned to Anne or not, but it's what I like about that old fashioned. I will say is that typically on a pre-mixed bottle as it comes across, and we talked about it a little bit. I like almost like just like I don't want to mess with it. If I want an old fashioned, I'm going to make an old fashioned. Like this is a gimmick. It's like buying a soda. You know what I mean? Like it's just it doesn't taste like that. It tastes like an old fashioned. I don't know how you do on that one.
I tend to just drink my whiskey straight. I tend not to have old fashions or Manhattans or anything like that. Sometimes when I'm out for my birthday dinner, I might order a cocktail as my dessert drink. And the last couple years I've ordered an old fashioned, and I was sitting there thinking when I poured this earlier today, because I just poured the old fashioned. Earlier when I poured it, I was like, should I cut up an orange and add an orange slice to it? Because I don't know that I've ever had the old fashioned. The Watershed old fashioned. I've had the bourbon multiple times, but I don't think I'd ever had the old fashioned before. And I was thinking, should I add something to it? But then I thought, well, wait a minute. When I drink whiskey, I just drink it straight. So let me just try this straight as is and see how it goes. And I was like, holy cow. I get this. I get the citrus. I get the bitters. It just very well rounded. It tastes just like the cocktail, and it doesn't change whether you add ice to it or not. It changes, whether or not you get some of the burn from the whiskey, but it still has the flavor that you expect from an old fashioned. It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
And you're at 35% on that one, which is surprising in my opinion for the way that it tastes. It is extremely smooth. And you can justify it like, oh, it's only 35%, but when
I think the bourbon's the same way. Like I said earlier, that bourbon at 90% drinks as smooth as, or at 90 proof drinks.
Yeah. I do want to show this comment as we lead out. And if you guys have any other cigar questions, Anne or Greg, Greg, if you guys have any other questions on this, we can cover them in part 2. But for time's sake, but Jason Edwards says even at a bar that may not have Watershed old fashioned. I don't know if Jason works for you guys or if
I was gonna say, to me, like
you have a new fan or your knowledge, you don't know Jason.
I know Jason.
Okay.
He's a good guy. Yeah.
Right,
He doesn't work for us, but he could have a job.
You can have even at a bar that may not have Watershed Old Fashioned, order one with Watershed Bourbon. It's delicious, makes a great Manhattan as well, which I believe completely. That's a great statement right there. Anytime you're ordering off menu when they have an Old Fashioned or Manhattan on the menu and they have their selection, most bars, if not all of them, are going to be open to whatever you want in there. So I definitely, I have not had one with Watershed Bourbon, but based on what you've done with your Old Fashioned bottle, I would second that, obviously. So for the first part here, guys, we will continue on the Facebook Live and YouTube Live. If you guys are listening to this on the audio or you're listening to after the fact, you can join the discussion.
Are we going to do the rating?
What's that? Oh, all right. Yeah, that's a good point. I meant to do that. All right. So I'll start with Nate. I want to put him on the spot. Normally at the end of these first parts, we do a 1 out of 10 on the cigar and the whiskey. So we're focusing on the Watershed Bourbon. Nate, go ahead with the cigar and the bourbon, and then Anne, if you got into the cigar at all, you can do the cigar or just the bourbon. And Greg, I know this is your baby, but I'm gonna need a 1 out of 10 rating from you as well on this bourbon. So and then I'll go last. So Nate, go ahead.
I'm gonna give both of them an 8.
Okay.
And the reason I give both of them is they're both, they're not top of the line, oh my gosh, I absolutely freaking love this. It's the greatest thing I've ever had. But they're also above, it's okay. There's somewhere in between, like the Watershed Bourbon, it's a really good bourbon, and the standard fifth comes in at $40 here in the state of Ohio. And we've had some other local bourbons or, some newer bourbons out there, and they always tend to creep towards that $50 mark. And being a $40 bottle, it's absolutely fantastic bottle. It's very easy to drink. Same thing with this cigar. It's a $9 cigar for the Toro at the Tinder Box, but it's a very enjoyable medium body cigar. Goes with a ton of different drinks and cocktails. Both of them are very well balanced. They both have a nice sweetness to both of them. I was actually surprised when I heard Greg say that the bourbon was about a 4-year, because it's so much smoother than what I expect from a 4-year bourbon. And it has so much more flavor than what I expect from a 4-year bourbon. So I think, and Steve and I, we've, doing this for as long as this podcast has been going on, we've had quite a few other Ohio bourbons, and none of them taste like this. And so,
is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing. Right, it's a good thing. But I mean, for being a 4-year Ohio, because the biggest concern we have sometimes when we drink an Ohio whiskey is we think there's just going to be so much corn flavor to it, but this doesn't have that. It's like, this drinks like a nice 6-8 year bourbon. It's got a great amount of flavor to it. I think some the experiment more of the oak flavor behind them. But at $40, the Watershed Bourbon is an absolute great buy. I think it's a value at $40 a bottle. I think sometimes it gets overlooked because it's an Ohio bourbon because of some of the other Ohio whiskeys that are out there. And one of the things that I really enjoyed, and I noticed earlier, there's a lot of companies that make whiskey that if they call themselves a small batch bourbon, small batch is in big print right there on the label, or it's right underneath the name. But you guys put it like way down here at the bottom in small print, small batch.
Yeah, you got to read the fine print.
Like, you have to look at, and then I also love how you say, batch whatever. So like mine's batch 97 for you. I absolutely love that. Like, we made this for you. I absolutely love it. So both of them, like I said, both of them, I give them an 8. They're the whiskey and cigar by itself, they're each solid.
Good. All right. Anne, what do you have? Do you want to make a comment on the cigar, or do you not get into it enough?
I did. And so, okay, my previous cigar experiences, we've talked about this.
Yes.
Not great. And
That's
felt
okay.
terrible for no, and actually, I'm like, this smells pretty good. Like this is really nice.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Good.
So I'm going to say a solid 9 because in my world, there's probably something better, but it was great. And Watershed Bourbon.
Yeah, let's hear it. I'm
going to give it a solid 9 because it's 90 proof. Or barrel proof. No,
now if it was a barrel proof.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely wonderful. This is my first time trying batch number 99. This is my favorite batch I've ever tried. I really like this one.
Which batch did you say you have?
I have 99.
Okay, I got 97.
Yeah. You were off the air there for a little bit. We had several people listening also that were throwing out 94. Someone had 100.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of 97. That was a great one.
It is. I'm enjoying it.
My favorite.
Yes.
All right, so we got a 9 and a 9. We got an 8 and 8. Greg, if you've had Watershed Bourbon before this podcast, just go into a fresh. What would you give this bourbon in a?
It's such a that was my first.
It's 10. 10.
It's hard. It's so hard because I see tasting all the barrels. I taste all the faults. And I taste all the best barrels. And so I see not only the faults, but the potential of this stuff too. And so like you were saying, Nate, it's only 4 years old, but we've got some stuff that's a little bit older. And so like I see it and I know we're making great product. And it's like when we released that 2-year stuff, it was great. It was on the right track, but it wasn't great yet. And I get to our 4-year and I love our 4-year and I think it's great. And, I can't fault anyone for rating it an 8 or a 9. Like, I think we're right in that range right now. I think that's where we are. I want to be a 10 so bad. I know, I taste the best whiskeys out there. I know we're not a 10 yet, but I like where we're headed. Some of this special stuff that's going to hit later this year, the Machino finished one we mentioned, and then the other one that I alluded to. I want to say that stuff's going to be 10. We'll see when it gets here. Like, it's still in barrels, but for what I'm drinking tonight, I probably, it's like, it's my baby, so it's hard to say it's not perfect, but I probably give it, I'm going to rest right between you two and give it an 8.5. Is that
wow?
Can I do that? Like I think
absolutely
do whatever you want. Yeah.
All right. So, but I also think here this is what I love. Batch 100. I would give batch 100 maybe a 9.5, a 9.2. Like, it's up above 9. And I'm drinking batch 87 tonight. And so, like Anne said, I know I've had batch 99. I love batch 99. And so I don't know, like I said, I know all the faults, I know all the potential. And so it's hard to just like come out and say like, give our bourbon 1 score, when I know too much about it. But I feel like we're in the right ballpark.
Yeah, you're your biggest critic. I mean, I think that's the way it's going to be, right? I mean, that's a good thing. You're striving for always something better, which is, it's a tough thing when you think you got like the best thing out of a bottle there, and then all of a sudden it's like you have to put something else in there. And the way you guys are doing this, I can appreciate everything you said there. I mean, I would say with the cigar, for the way I typically rate would be, based on the purpose of the product also, you know what I mean? So for Nat Sherman Metropolitan Habano, I would give it a 9 for an $8 cigar. And that's, relative to a market that anymore, the opening price for a premium cigar is probably $6 to $7 in Ohio. So you're at the bottom range of that. So sub $10, this cigar smokes absolutely like they could have charged more than that.
Absolutely.
So that's where I give it a 9, and it kind of that carries over, I think, to the Watershed Bourbon. I will be the first to admit, embarrassingly, in the given company, that I have not had a whole lot of Watershed products. I like gin to a point. Vodka, I put, I'll have it in martinis. A vodka martini guy. But as far as, whiskeys go, it's something that the competition that you guys have, we've alluded to it. We talked about it quite a bit is the Ohio market. When you're out of that, I mentioned it earlier, there's a hesitation for me as a buyer. I can say this, with this being around that $40 mark on the shelf, the competition you guys are rolling with, whether it's Ohio, it's newer brands, no one comes into the market anymore. Typically, there's a rarity that it's going to be $30 or less on the Ohio shelves. I mean, you're walking in the park and you're walking into the game at $35, $40, and typically anymore it's $40 to $50 as your opening price. So the fact that you guys are able to do what you're doing with this, and with Nate's points of being a 4-year bourbon, this is definitely drinking with older whiskeys. And I have, and I'm not saying this because you guys are on here. This is pure honest opinion. I mean, this is something that I will go back to on more of a regular basis, because not only it's great to shop local, it's great to support people that you like, you buy from people you like. We talk about that a lot on this podcast, but this is something that I could give to friends, and this is something that I could, like I said, it's a daily sipper. And I am more than, I've had it before, and I don't know why I didn't go back to it. Probably because I'm one of those people that's like, all right, what's new? What else is out there? You're constantly buying new stuff, and in that $40 to $50 range, you got a lot of competition. But if anyone out there had the opinion that I had in the past of if it's not, from Kentucky, or, you don't just drink that, but if it's from Ohio, it's from New York, it's from anywhere else, and you're hesitant, I think at $40, this is a bottle you need to try, because I've become more of a believer tonight of something like this than I have in a while on this podcast, trying the things we've had. And so I definitely give this, for, again, all intents and purposes, and the price point involved, definitely a 9. I agree with Anne on both of those, 9 and 9 on both of those. So if you guys have not checked out Watershed, or the way it says on the bottle, bourbon from Watershed Distillery, I would definitely grab a bottle, or at least have it at a bar, because again, at that price point, it's worth at least trying a glass when you get back out in the public and you're hitting the bars again and you're looking for something new to try. If you guys haven't had this is one to go to. So I will definitely buy another bottle of this. Well, you guys gave us this one, but I'll buy another bottle of this one.
Yes.
I bought the old fashioned. I didn't know you were going to bring that over. So I would say this is a 9 out of 10 for sure. So guys, thank you so much. So for part 1, I do want to thank our sponsors here, and we'll roll right into the, like I said, what I was saying before. Thank you, Tinder Box at Easton, for the weekly featured cigar. Also, the support. Thank you to our Patreon page, patreon.com/bourbon and BS podcast. You guys can actually support us and keep this thing going. We've seen some improvements. That was a huge, huge factor when we had to change the format to this remote podcasting and the remote mobile herf, as we call it, and then drinking instead of in the garage like we had planned originally with you two. This is it's been a huge help. Also, Altadis USA for the sponsorship and the support. Typically, we do a second cigar from Altadis. They are the makers, as you see behind me, H. Upman, Romeo Julieta, and Monte Cristo, among others. And guys, thank you very much. This was a great first part, and I know we went a little long, so we'll try to roll straight through this here, but I do want to cheers you guys. Thank you very much. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. Thanks for being a part of it and sharing your great products with us.
Thanks for having us on. Cheers.
Thank you.
And Freeze. I know we're going a little longer. I told you it can do that. We'll try. Are you guys good for another half hour to an hour?
Yeah, let's do it.
Greg's gonna die.
Greg's like, I feel not so good.
Well, I had a quick question for Greg. You had mentioned that sometimes you taste some of the barrels. They may be at that 4-year mark where you're normally putting out stuff, but sometimes you taste a barrel and it's just not there. It just you just don't like the taste that barrel has. I mean, so you just sit there and go, you know what, I'm going to let it sit there another year, or do you do something else with it? I mean, what's your thought process when you taste one of those barrels that you just don't like the taste of it yet?
We basically have 3 options. Number 1, we do kind of what you're saying, and we let it sit there for a little bit longer. If we're like, it just tastes a little bit young, we'll let it sit there. Sometimes we get some off flavors in it that we don't love, that we think probably aren't going to age out. And so we'll do one of 2 options with that, the 2 leftover options. If we have a big enough batch, we might take one of those barrels and put it in the batch and just say, hey, It's not perfect, but when you're dumping 16 barrels, you can afford to have some. It adds to the flavor, but it doesn't take away from the flavor necessarily.
Is that your normal batch size?
Right now, we're up to about 15, 16 barrels.
Because I think there was an episode where we had Jake on before, where he said a small batch can be anything from 2 to 250 barrels.
Oh, good. Yeah, it could be.
So a 15,
like,
16 barrel
that's a
small
big
batch.
Like, yeah, it's big for us. But then the third thing that we'll do sometimes is just because it's a flavor we don't love doesn't mean people don't love it. And so we'll pull those aside. And sometimes when people come through the distillery and they want to taste, they want to pick a private barrel, we'll let them taste some of that. Usually we'll put out some barrels that we love and some barrels that I don't want to say that we don't love them. They just don't fit our profile. They're a little bit different. And so we'll have kind of some of the unique barrels up there along with some that fit the profile. And that way people, if they're looking for something wildly unique that's on their shelf that can only be there, they could pick some of those. But if they want something that lines up more with what our bourbon is and say, hey, we went to Watershed and got this. Oh, yeah, it lines up and tastes like your stuff. Then they have that option too.
So at this point, when you're doing your bourbon and you're doing those, 15, 16 barrels or whatever, there's a certain flavor that you're looking for when you do that? Or is it just, hey, this stuff's this old, we're just going to mix these barrels together and that's this batch. That's batch 101 or 102.
Nah, I mean, we started at the beginning with this idea that older was better, but we've come to the conclusion that that's not the case. And so there's a lot more. Like we'll taste, if we're going to dump 15, we'll taste 30 and we'll pick our 15 that we like that fit this fit our profile a little bit better. And I mentioned earlier that we have this tasting panel. We're getting smarter and better with the tasting panel of really being able to define what flavors we're looking for and what flavors we're picking up on, so that we can fit that profile and make sure that there's more consistency across the board. But I always challenge them and I'm like, look, at the beginning, it was really simple. Like we got 4 barrels that are old enough. Like those are the 4 barrels that we're taking. And now we have some variation, but you can't just continue to push barrels off. So you got to balance this. Like we're still not big enough just to take whatever we want. So you're balancing like what's in the queue and what is your favorite barrel and, product. It's kind of a complex thing, but I think we're getting better at it. And the nice thing is we're getting more people involved and they're learning. And so that's always fun to see too, when you get some more energy coming in there and tasting those barrels.
Absolutely. All right. I'm going to roll into the second part here. So imagine. So again, this is something that we do that I thank the sponsors again for part 2, because it's a part 2 of the podcast. So bear with me here. All right. Welcome back to the Bourbon and BS podcast. This is episode 115, part 2. We are live on Facebook. If you guys are listening to this in your car or anywhere else, and you're listening to the audio on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and a handful of others, definitely check us out. Every Wednesday night around 7:30, we do a live broadcast on both Facebook Live and YouTube Live. You can check us out either way. And if you have any questions on that, message us, and we will point you in the right direction. You can like our Facebook page, you can like our Instagram, all that good stuff. And then also, we have some special guests. If you guys haven't checked out part 1, I do have a quote here from one of the listeners on live that I want to actually summarize this. But we have Greg and Anne from Watershed Distillery. Guys, thanks for sticking with us. Once you get us starting to talk about whiskey, we barely got to the cigars tonight, which was I'm okay with that. But I know that we're enjoying the cigars as well. But Watershed Distillery, thank you for being a part of this. For those that didn't listen to part 1, I encourage you to do this. And this is something that I love having the live feedback here. We have Jerry. He says, I can say I bought my bottle a few months ago when I first started getting into bourbon. So we have a newer bourbon drinker here. Thought it was okay. Tonight got me to revisit it after several months of collecting other bourbons. And I will say I'm quite surprised at how much I like this bourbon now. It will remain in my rotation going forward. And now I can't wait to visit the distiller when it opens back up. So if you guys haven't had... If you haven't had Watershed Bourbon, then I would definitely, based on that and based on the first part, listen back, because we learned a lot about it. And there's a lot of fans of this thing. And much like myself, I am even more of a fan now. And it sounds like we've got a few people out there that are also revisiting it. We had a lot of people drinking different batches of it, which was very cool too. So listen to that. I want to thank our sponsors, Tinder Box at Easton, for the support and the weekly featured cigar. First part we also talked about towards the end of the podcast mainly was the Nat Sherman Metropolitan Habano. That was rated pretty highly actually by everyone on the episode, which was great. And then also Altadis USA for the continued support and the typical weekly second cigar. We appreciate all of the love from them and Josh Bentley and Paul Waller for really pushing that through and believing in us. Also, BS Cigar Company, check it out. Now's the time to order them while we still have them in stock. When we can, we're shipping them out daily almost, it seems like, at Tinder Box at Easton. So check the BS Cigar Company out for the gold and the silver. We appreciate all the support there and hope you guys are enjoying those cigars as well. And the patreon.com/Bourbon and BS podcast, you guys can be a part of it and support us. It's pretty easy to log on there, $1 or more, whatever you guys want to contribute. We appreciate the support. It helps it go. It helps us improve on a weekly basis, and we hope that you guys agree with that. So without further ado, I wanted to get in. So tonight we were talking about the topic, and I'm so happy. I said it earlier, but community, strength and community right now is, everyone's talking about, COVID and everything else. And it's easy that's where the conversation goes, no matter who you're talking to. You can talk to a complete stranger. You can talk to your mother. You can talk to your business partner. You can talk to, a person on the street as you're, waiting in line at CVS or whatever it might be. But it's an easy conversation. But what I like about the strength and community, I looked it up even, like community, a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. And when I looked that up, this was already after I was speaking mostly with Anne about setting this stuff up, and she sent me a lot of notes. And one of the things that we've been doing with the Bourbon and BS podcast, we've expanded on Facebook to a community page, and I called it that because that's exactly what it is. When we're doing this podcast, it's like the episode ends and the conversation can continue. There's a lot of that common characteristic part of the community is not only where you live and the proximity factor, but it's what you're interested in and where your passions and hobbies lie. And then once you start hooking up with these people, you find out more and more about them. And that's where the true, in my opinion, the strength of community comes into. You want to support each other. It's like, it starts with like, what are you smoking? What are you drinking? And all that stuff. Like, it's a hobby, it's a common bond. And it becomes even almost stronger than the proximity. But if you link those two together, there's a lot that can come out of this. And I feel like you guys being on the podcast tonight, when Ann sent this stuff over, we go into the background of Greg, and, one of the things is that not only did you found this 10 years ago, but you played volleyball when you were younger, and you were very successful at it, it sounds like. I don't follow college volleyball, but I assume
nobody does. Well, at least on the men's side, there's some fans that come out to the women's team, but
yeah, for
different reasons.
Right. There were about if there were 12 guys on the team, there were at least 24 parents in the stands, and that was actually today they get much more. There's a good crowd over at the new Cavelli Center for the men's.
Well, good. But then you transferred that into a career for a while with a professional volleyball career. Is that correct?
Yeah, I went over to Switzerland for a couple of years. And
volleyball,
which seems like another lifetime ago, but it was fun. It was a great experience.
It's got to be a great experience. And
how tall are you, Greg?
I'm only 6'1". I went through college feeling so short because everybody else on the team was 6'6" and above. They were all giants, and so. I kind of went through my college career feeling very short. We had guys as tall as 7 feet on the team, and it was I felt like I was just I kept waiting for my growth spurt, but it just never came. But now past college, I feel kind of 6'1". I'm not sure. So anyway,
I was a setter, so I
our setter was 6'7". When I was my last year there, even the setter's looking down at me like, come on, man, let's keep going.
But when you came back here, you said, and this is again off of some of the notes here, is that you were inspired by the sense of community over there in Switzerland, and you transferred that back over here. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so this kind of gives you perspective. So my first year, I played for a team just outside of a little ways outside of Zurich. And it was a good team, and we had fun. And then I got traded, and I was traded to a team that was in a town called Appenzell. And Appenzell is kind of out in the country a little bit. And that's where I really experienced this. So Appenzell, one thing that I noticed was they fiercely support local there. And you get off the main Appenzeller train, or the main train in Switzerland that goes, outside of Switzerland. And when you get into Appenzell, you got to get on a smaller train, narrower tracks, and they build those train cars right there in Appenzell. They have their own soda company there, their own beer company, cheese company, but not just they have it, but everybody serves Appenzeller beer. Everybody serves Goba, which is their soda, so they don't have Pepsi or Coke. And so what I noticed was in this, it was, I had to learn the hard way, of course. When you play professional volleyball, you don't have a lot of money like you would think about professional sports here. But I was right out of college and didn't matter. Like, I was in Europe playing volleyball. This was great.
Yeah.
And so my wife's with me. We're married and we're in Appenzell. We don't have a lot of money. And we realized one day we drive over to Germany, which was 30 minutes away. And we're in Germany and we go into this grocery store and everything's a third the price. And we're like, this is amazing. And we load the car up and we go driving back across the border. And of course, you're not supposed to do that. And so the border guard's upset with us. And we're like, we didn't know, we're American. And so,
right.
All right, just go through, like, don't do this again. And so then at practice that night, I'm telling the guys, I'm like, hey, we were in Germany and the groceries are a third the price. And we brought them over. And these guys, and I'm thinking, like, this is going to be cool. We're all like young dudes. And so it's like,
yeah,
of course, it's all about saving money at that point and like, what deal can you get? And these guys are looking at me like, I got a third eye or something. And the one guy goes, well, why wouldn't you go, to Rolf Inau and get eggs? Like, he sells the eggs. Why wouldn't you get eggs here? And why wouldn't you use, Valti, his company makes the soda, or his family makes the soda. Why wouldn't you support Valti's family? And Rolly Coke, his family builds all the furniture. Why wouldn't you, like, why are you going to Germany? Like, keep those. And it was just like, they started naming people. And it's a small enough community. I know these people.
Right.
Valti and Rolly are both on the volleyball team, like these guys. And so it's like, when you're looking at that stuff, you're like, and I think actually Valti, his family didn't make the soda. They made the spirits. They made the whiskey. But Rolly's family made the furniture. And Rolf Inau and the egg guy, like, I knew Rolf, like, I'd been to his farm. And so then I'm feeling like terrible at this point. And I'm like, oh yeah, good point. Yeah, sorry. Like, of course, like, should support those guys. But then they started talking about how their dollars stay in the country and stay in the community. And so when we came back and it was a lot, it was, I came back and had a real job for 10 years. It wasn't like I walked back and was like, we're going to make spirits. Like, I needed some experience, and I think I would have failed right out of the gate if I tried at a young age to start this. But when Dave and I fast forward to 2008, 2009, when we're thinking about ideas, a lot of that stuff came out, and it was like this local movement was catching on here, but it didn't have near the fire and support it had over there. And so we started talking like, hey, beer, cheese, spirits. Like, spirits is a good one. And of course, at the time, like, I was in the pig industry, so it was my volleyball to pigs to booze. But I was actually driving to a pig farm, and I called Dave up, and I was like, Dave, what if we made booze and gin, bourbon? And his comment was, it's got to be illegal. There's a reason nobody's doing it. And I was like,
be illegal. I love that.
Yeah. I was like, this town I lived in, they made it. And so then it was like, well, let's live in a world where it might be legal. Let's look it up. And at that time, a quick Google search showed that there were other distilleries out there, and it was that moment of like, hey, we could bring this to Columbus. That could be cool. So, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of inspiration from this town that I lived in, and just seeing how they supported local and how that really made it possible for all those businesses to stay in business. Yeah.
And I mean, the big thing now is, and I know you've done several interviews lately, about what you guys are doing right now. And I do want to bring that up earlier in the episode here for part 2 is during this time, obviously you're focused on the core business, right? Which is the spirits and everything like that. But
right.
with that being said, and I mean, it's easy conversation transition into what you guys are doing right now. Is you don't have to necessarily step up and support it, but it makes more sense now knowing a little bit more about you, what you guys do as a company, is that you guys have transitioned. There's a handful of others that have done it because you guys have the capability to do so, but you guys have stepped up when you saw a need for the sense of community. And I assume most of it is local. You're not getting a whole lot of online orders for this stuff, but you guys transitioned at least part of your efforts to doing hand sanitizer, which definitely something you guys didn't have to do. This is not something, because again, in the business that you guys are in, I mean, liquor sales right now are booming. It is insane. So the other parts of your business, the restaurant,
everybody's stuck at home.
Everyone's stuck at home.
They got to drink. They have to drink.
And Ohio is among most of the states in the United States of America that they deemed liquor stores were
essential.
Old fashioned, people, old fashioned.
Yes.
And essential or not, but I mean, bottom line is that you guys are in the age of doing things with age, right? So you're at that point. You guys are. This is the business you're in, is letting things sit, and then right now you could have easily just sat back and you're like, yeah, we'll keep pumping stuff out. This is a time for us to kind of go inward and be creative. But there is that strength of community, is that this is something that, yeah, you could anytime anyone does anything nice, someone can spin it and be like, oh, they're just doing this so that when it comes back out of this, people like them and all that stuff. But the more we've had an opportunity to chat with you guys tonight, the more I've learned is that I firmly don't believe that's the case here with what you guys are doing with doing the hand sanitizer. What was the transition? I mean, is this something you had to figure out, just like you had to figure out everything we talked about in part one, where it's like, hey, what if we make booze? Now it's like, hey, what if we make hand sanitizer? I mean, how did that transition for you guys?
Yeah, it was very quick. And everybody had this progression right at the beginning of March. Well, most people at the beginning of March had this progression, at least in Ohio. But I remember it very clearly, and it wasn't that long ago, but we had our holiday party on March 8th. And we had that planned. Being a distillery and being a restaurant, you can't have a holiday party around the holidays. It's crazy time. And so we said, let's have it in March. So we had it planned for a while. And so we had our holiday party on March 8th, and it was this great night. The whole team was there. We had 55 employees or so. And I remember standing up there thanking people, saying 2019 was great. We're going to have a great year in 2020. And I remember it was just a small little piece of it at the end was like, I wasn't even going to say coronavirus, but I think, we're obviously going to have some challenges with that this year, but we've got the right team, and we will get through this thing, and it's not going to affect our business in a significant way. And then that
was common around early March, by the way.
Well, yeah. So we packed a lot in that week. On Wednesday of that week, we had our annual investor meeting. And coronavirus took up a little more of that one, because by Wednesday it was like, all right, this thing's getting a little serious, but it still wasn't much. And in that, one of our owners raised their hand and said, well, will you guys make hand sanitizer? And I have to say that owner was happened to be my wife. And I'm standing up there like, with all the owners, there's not many of them. It's a small group, or a tight-knit group, but none of them work in the business. I'm the only one that's there day to day. And so of course I'm like, no, we're not, we're not going to get into that. Like it's complicated. The FDA is involved. Like we're not.
Was that the first time that she asked you that, or was that a loaded? I mean, like you.
No, it was like she had asked. It was
a conversation at home first.
Yeah,
and you're like, no, we're not going to do it. And then she's like, well, I'm going to put them on the spot.
Put them on the spot.
I have a question I never asked you.
Yeah.
What about this thought? You're like looking at her like, come.
Yeah. Just in there burning burning holes in the door.
Later, we're talking about this. No. But I was like, I don't know why I was so sure that night we weren't going to. But even that Wednesday, I was still under the mentality that this thing wasn't going to be as big as it was. Right. And it was Thursday. Thursday, I got to work. And as I went through the day Thursday, it started hitting me. And I was like, this is serious. This is like really real. And things are going to get shut down. And we're going to have to put a plan in place. And then fast forward to Sunday. I mean, you went from holiday party one Sunday. The next Sunday, the governor says you're shutting down all the restaurants. And so we're having a group meeting a week later, and there's tears, and there's some bourbon, and we're all talking as a restaurant after we shut the doors. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you guys. Like, you're doing everything right. You're running a great restaurant. You're a great team. We just had this meeting a week ago, but we don't have jobs. And so,
yeah, it's not personal. It's not your fault, right? I mean, that's
right.
Yeah.
Like, it's not supposed to be this way where you guys are, and we've had our ups and downs as a restaurant where we get a lot of people in the door, but that doesn't necessarily, it's hard to make money in a restaurant. And so you got to control your labor. You got to control your food. Like, guys that do it well, they're experts, and they've worked really hard to get there. And so for us, we're year 3, and we've done some really great things, but we've had our troubles times where our costs are out of line. Well, they were doing great. And so it was a really hard conversation. But so then we took that as like, we got punched in the face. And so we're sitting there that whole next week trying to write plans for, all of our customers, our restaurants. And so we're trying to write this, how do we survive business plan? And also just looking around, and everybody just was, you got punched in the face. Everyone's like half our team's on unemployment. And so, yeah. So then we get this note from Buddy Distillery down in North Carolina that says, hey, we started making hand sanitizer, and we got an inquiry from somebody in Columbus that needs hand sanitizer. We think you guys should make it for them because we can't ship outside of North Carolina the way they were set up.
Right.
So I read the email, and I was like, and she actually sent up some of the links to the FDA stuff. And so I started reading into it, and I was like, well, we're one of the few, you look at distilleries, we're FDA licensed and we're TTB licensed, which sets it up as a pretty easy transition in the grand scheme.
What is TTB?
The TTB is the Tax and Trade Bureau, which regulates alcohol.
Okay.
And so, I was reading this guy's email where he desperately can't get hand sanitizer and he needs it. He's a first responder. And I'm looking at our licenses, and I'm like, guys, I think we should maybe look into this. Like, this might be something that we need to do to step up and help. And that's when I started asking people. I guess I just didn't know how hard it was to get hand sanitizer at that Wednesday, that Thursday. And I started asking around. And of course, my wife's like, yeah, you can't find it anywhere. How did you not know this? I'm like, because I'm losing my business. Like, and so
I'm focused elsewhere.
Right. Because I'm crying in my pillow, whatever it is. Like, I
and
can't.
Bourbon.
Yeah, and my bourbon. So we started looking at it, and we're like, people need this. Let's figure it out. And there were some moving parts at the beginning, and there's a lot of regulation, and so it took us a little bit. But we went full speed, and by April 1, we had sanitizer that we were packaging, and we put it out pretty quickly after that. And it's been really powerful to see the response in the community. And when you do some of these things, you don't know. Like, you're like, I think people need it. And we called some. One of our owners was a longtime firefighter. And so I called him and talked to him and said, hey, do people need this? Do people want it? How do we connect with people, firefighters, police officers, and get this to them? And so he helped with that. So he still has contacts all over the city. And then the other huge help was Tyler, actually the first guy that I ever hired, Tyler. His sister and his brother-in-law are both longtime firefighters. And so his sister got on the phone with me and said, hey, we need it. It's huge need right now. I'll connect you to every fire department. So she was in Arlington for a long time. Now she's in Westerville. And she connected us to so many, to Dublin, to so many different firefighters around the city, and first responders. And so then we saw like, oh man, there is a giant need for this. And so we started going full speed. And as I walked through the distillery that week and I'm looking around at people, it's not people that got punched in the face anymore. It's people who are excited about what we're doing, feeling like they're doing their part and we're fighting this thing. And like we normally make booze and it's fun and we have a good time and people are on our team because it's a good culture and it's fun and it's great. But all of a sudden, like, we're given an opportunity to do something that is, and not that booze aren't important. Like, we all know they're important.
Essential, by the way.
Yeah, essential. But you just have this greater good now that we're helping, where people need this to stay healthy. They need it to keep their families healthy, their loved ones healthy. And so it was cool to see that mood shift and come back up as we started that. And, you know, I don't know if we talk about it enough, but Dave and I picked the name Watershed Distillery. We
have not actually discussed this at all tonight about the marketing behind the name.
Well, yeah, we picked Watershed because we loved a watershed is that land area that basically distills water down to a river or a lake, and communities are formed in and around those watersheds. So you look at Columbus and it's formed at these rivers. You look at most communities and they're formed around this water source. And so that for us was like, that's community. And so when there's an opportunity, and we always talk about our communities, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier, community doesn't always have to be locale, close to you in proximity. But we talk about the community in Columbus for sure. But our Cleveland bartender community and restaurant community, our Detroit community, our Atlanta community. And so for us, Columbus is obviously like, that's where we live. That's where our business is. Like, that's the one we're so close to. And so when there's an opportunity to do something in Columbus that feels as powerful as this, we kind of looked at it and said, all right, we got to do it. And I'll be honest, at first we said, we're going to do it for free. And we're going to put out this hand sanitizer for free. We've got 200 gallons of it. That's a ton. And we're going to put it out there. And that was gone like that.
Right.
Like, oh, man, I think the demand's gigantic. I don't think we can give it for free because I think we need it sustainable so that we can keep doing it.
Can't afford it.
No, because people, they want us to keep doing it. And so it was like, hey, we'll pay you to do it. We'll gladly pay you to do it. And so we said, all right. And what the factor that's been amazing is we've gone back and hired not all of our staff from the restaurant, but a huge chunk of that staff from the restaurant is now working, and they're bottling hand sanitizer, and they're taking phone calls, and they're helping us. We have a setup where you can't come in the restaurant, but you can pull up and we'll take it out to the car and put it in there. So
you guys had lines and lines of that stuff.
It's been crazy. It's been crazy. And part of that is because
from an operational standpoint, like, how easy or difficult is it to transition from, distilling spirits to making hand sanitizer?
It hasn't been too tough. We got big tanks and we've got equipment to do it all. The hardest thing is we don't have the right bottling lines to bottle hand sanitizer in the proper bottles automatically. So we're doing it all by hand. But we have a whole bunch of restaurant staff that need stuff to do. So it's, it's not I know that's not their favorite job. Like, nobody wants to spend 8 hours a day forever.
But they're earning a paycheck.
But they're earning a paycheck, and they know they're helping out. And they know it's short term until we beat this thing. And so I think there's nobody complaining at all.
No, absolutely. I think it's making the best of a very bad situation. And you came into this company. When did you start with Watershed?
Back in September.
So you're what about
new
8 months?
6-7 months into this, you're at this holiday party and all that stuff, and then you see the following weeks progress. Like, I mean, coming into it, obviously you're part of the whiskey, bourbon, spirit community, which is something we're talking about. Is that there's that common bond, right? And you're talking about that, Greg, of how it expands out, right? So it's not just Columbus; there is that shared interest, that characteristic there. But and you coming into this, I mean, this is, your first year, you want to hit the ground running. You want to see what you can do as far as, for Watershed and all that stuff. And then this happens. I mean, what's your perspective on what you guys are doing here with the community? Because there's other companies you could have gotten hired in September to that aren't doing this. So I mean, what's your viewpoint of this?
Well, so to echo kind of what Greg said, the progression from the holiday party to our sales blitz to our, we were actually in Georgia that week, for the first couple days, and the progression was so fast. And I remember Greg saying something in the office. He's like, I kind of think this coronavirus thing is going to be big. And I'm like, no, it's not, whatever. So I don't think that any of us actually thought that it would be what it was. But that being said, it's been so tremendously rewarding to be part of such a small team where when we face something, everybody comes together and it's like, all right, all hands on deck. What are we going to do? Like, that's tremendously exciting. And that's not something that you're going to get as part of corporate America spirits.
Right.
That's really, it really truly is a family, all hands on deck. People are doing things that are out of their normal daily tasks, and everybody's kind of bringing their, the things that we've seen come out of our sales team in this whole thing. We had one sales rep that actually put together this, kind of this entire resource guide for people that are in the service industry and all of the help and resources that are available.
Yeah.
And, we've got other people that are actually like, they're the people that are coming out to cars and taking the orders and, doing it in a really safe way. We've got people on the bottling lines. It's been inspiring.
It is amazing to see how quickly our team adapted. And I think, it's not like I had some master plan and was like, you go do this, you go do that, you do this, and we're going to make this work. It was like Anne said, we sat down and people were like, well, how can we do this? And people stood up and we had one particular sales rep said, I can take this part and I'll organize every call coming in exactly what they want, and I'll schedule it out. I love to do that. And we had a bartender who just stepped up and said, you know what? I think I can run the bottling team. I'll run that. I'll be in charge of this production team that is bottling this. And we had another sales rep that stood up and said, hey, I'll kind of manage this whole front of the house hand sanitizer stuff. And so it was just like people started jumping in and doing it. And, I think we have enough faith in each other that it was like, yep, roll. Yep, go ahead, go for it. Go do it. And knowing that, hey, this isn't going to be the smoothest road. There's going to be some bumps, but let's start going down the road and we'll figure it out as we go. And I look at like our production manager who basically took on 2 jobs at once, still doing all her production with the booze, but learning everything we needed to do and getting product in to make hand sanitizer at the same time. It's just cool to see all that stuff going down and see the team really step up in a huge way.
I think that you hit something with, I don't know if you think this way, but one of the best things I think when you're in a team, when you're in that even like the community, if you want to call it that, like the organization like your guys is what you did was one of the age-old practices in business where you look at your team, you look at a group of people, and you honestly just ask, what do you think we should do? Or what do you think like in your mind, what's your call here? Because you have a collective of people there that I think that you leaned on each other. I mean, that's what this is all about. And I think it sounds like in the last 10 years, at least with Watershed, you've been doing that constantly. So when you're presented with something like this, that my takeaway on that is that it doesn't take a whole lot of brain power to just look at each other in the same room and say, what do you think we should do? And it sounds like you did that, whether you asked that particular question or not. But now you have people stepping up. You're like, well, I think we should do this and I can do this. And then people start stepping up to the plate. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, and I don't know how many, you've had some of these interviews recently because of what you guys are doing, but there's also the other aspect that no one's talking about anymore because all it is about, let's wear masks, let's do this, let's hand sanitizer, let's wash our hands like our mom told us to when we were 6 years old, because that apparently gets lost over the decades of your life, is that you don't know how to do some of these things on a regular basis. But you guys are also still running a business. Like this is not all, like you didn't cut off production. You're like, all right, well, let's empty let's empty everything out, and we're just doing hand sanitizer. I mean, what's the transition there as far as that goes? I mean, I feel like no one wants to talk about the big thing right now. And again, I'm trying not to get onto the COVID thing, but is the consistency of a community and the consistency of a business, is that the success there is, yeah, you have to add some things, you have to adapt at times, but at the same time, you have to stick to your core. You have to do things so you can do these types of efforts that you're able to do now.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the nice advantages of having that. And it's going to come out wrong, but we have this restaurant staff that we were able to hire back. So we have a team of people that's focused on hand sanitizer, but we have another team that's focused on gin, vodka, bourbon, all the normal stuff. And so we're fortunate that that we have those people that we can hire back in to throw them in the hand sanitizer side of things, because we wouldn't have the manpower, and our production team was trying to do it all for about 2 weeks, and it was one of those things where it was like, this isn't going to work long term. We can't. It's definitely two separate businesses, and it's going to hurt us if we don't try to find some balance here. And the nice thing for us, our people were excited to get on board and help, because it's not you can't just. I feel like if it was just coming from me, like, let's go make hand sanitizer, it wouldn't work at all. But you got a whole group of people that is super passionate about it, and they're okay if they're working late, and they're okay if we're pushing harder than we've ever pushed before, and they're okay if we add a second shift. We added a second shift on bottling both sides of things. So, if I was forcing people to do that, it would be a painful process. But they're all like, everyone's jumping in and saying, well, we need 2 shifts. Well, we got to work on Saturday. And so this place is humming 6 days a week now. I force everyone to get out of here on Sunday just to relax and try to keep some sanity and not get burnt out. And I try to make sure that everybody has 2 days off in a week, but the production team's here on Monday, and the sales team, the sanitizer sales team's here on Saturday. So there's a little bit of overlap there, but yeah, it's really great to see how excited they are about it and how hard they're pushing. And
well, I think that you obviously the big thing about this is when you talk about community, and that's kind of why I want to talk about this as well, because you can translate this to other aspects of life, right? So one of the things that you were able to do over the last 10 years is you learned a lot, I'm sure, about who to hire, who to fire, and the HR side of things, and who you're surrounding yourself with, right? So making those choices and getting stronger at these types of trials that we're going through right now. I mean, that's the key of it. If you had the wrong people in the positions for what they were doing before, you wouldn't have the same experience, right? It wouldn't have the same success of the transition here.
That's so true. Yeah, you're right. It is all about people on the team, and we've made a lot of wrong hires over the years and had to figure out the hard way. But it is, we talk about being a people first company, and it's all about the people on the team and getting the right people and really letting them do their thing. And, I don't know if I probably make plenty of mistakes, and my team lets me know sometimes that I am making mistakes, which is good. But I always think about it this way: like, I try to hire people that are better than me at what they do. And the best way to think of that, like, everyone kind of says that, but the best example I have is our chef, because it's really easy to think about. Like, I'm not a chef. And if I tried to make the food in the kitchen, people would know where we would come to Watershed, and that's that. It would just be really simple. We'd be out of business in no time. But when we started Watershed Kitchen and Bar, and we came up with this idea, we went out and we knew who we wanted. We were like, we need this guy. He's great. And so we went out and we asked him, and we actually had to ask him 3 times before we said yes. But he finally said yes, and he came in. and he started in November, and we didn't open the restaurant until end of January. And while he's working on the recipes, our owners, my buddies, my friends, everyone's like, what kind of restaurants is it going to be? What are the recipes? What are you putting on the menu?
Yeah.
And I honestly didn't know. I was like, I don't know. But we got Chef Jack Moore, and he's going to do something really great.
I should probably sit down with him and have a conversation just to figure it out.
Well, I mean, I told him, I was like, well, put together a menu. Like, I mean, be ready to go. Here's when we're starting. You be ready to go day one with your menu. And it was just that. Like, I didn't want to go tell him what to do because my menu is not going to be as good as his menu. He understands restaurants. He understands producing meals and having to do that. And so it was just that, like, get out of the way, let him run. And it was, I think within 2 weeks of us opening, Jack comes to me and he's like, hey, do you want to try some of this stuff on the menu? I'm like, yes, please, let me try it. But it was amazing, but it was just like, hey, not only saying you have freedom to write the menu and do your thing, but that's what we do. Like, hey, you're the chef because we think you can do it the best. Like, you go do it and you run it. And I mean, there's definitely feedback along the way and stuff like that, but that's kind of what those are the people that we want on board, people that we can just hand things over to with trust and say, hey, here's how you fit in with Team Watershed. Go do your thing. And there's always feedback going from the other managers and stuff, but it's cool to see it in action when we get into this, complete shift. I think it allows us to shift much faster when everybody's working together to make that happen, as opposed to like everyone looking at me going, what do we do? And I'm like, I don't know what we do. Like, this is the first pandemic that we've been through. Yeah. And so
as a leader, you get looked to as that. And that is it's a humbling thing there that you do, is that you say that I don't know either. We got to figure it out together. And I think that's what's happened all over. And Nate, do you have something? You're holding up your hand there.
Well, I did have a question. I first thought about this question, Greg, when you were talking about when you were playing volleyball in Switzerland. Initially, my question, I was thinking, do you find a greater sense of community when you live in a smaller town versus a big city? But then when you're talking about this whole transition, greater sense of community when you have a small business versus when you have a giant corporation that you're in charge of?
Yeah, for me, I think that is generally the case. Yes, if you get this smaller group, but I also think it's really possible in bigger settings. So when I was at Ohio State, I think the beauty of it for me was it was this big entity that had all these possibilities, and but at the same time, I had this core group, this volleyball team that from day one I was instantly connected to and had that group. And so I felt like that was my Ohio State family. But then I had this bigger giant community that I was a part of with the university. And I almost feel like that's Columbus for us, where we've got this team of Watershed Distillery, but we're part of this really cool giant city that I say giant. I mean, for us, it's big. But there's so much cool stuff. Yeah, there's so much cool stuff going on here, and it's great to be a part of that and to be a part of the drink scene, the food scene, and help write some of that. And now, to be a part of this response to COVID, and I don't know, it feels like, even though Columbus isn't small, it doesn't feel huge to me anymore. It feels like it's a part of we feel part of the community, and we're excited to be part of that community.
I feel like this is a time that it's kind of everyone's turned inward, right? People aren't leaving their house as much, right? So I don't know if you can comment on this, any of you guys. Anne, I mean, I've said, so Anne dropped off the bottle, so she's been like by the house, right? So I live on a cul-de-sac. Nate's obviously been over before to be in the garage.
Once or twice.
Once or twice. I moved into this house a little over a year ago, and there's people around me that have been living here for 15, 20 years, and it's one of those things that I have noticed, and I'm interested to see what you guys think about this, is that people, like, in this day and age, and it may be in the small towns, small communities, different parts of Columbus and other big cities, people don't talk to their neighbors. They wave maybe as they're pulling out, or they're, leaving the house, they're coming home, and they've got their hands full, and they're like, hey, how you doing? All that stuff. I know I have had more conversations with my immediate neighbors because I'm not at work. No one's at work. No one has anyone to talk to right now. You know what I mean? Like, everyone's doing what we're doing right now, not necessarily on a podcast, but you hear all this stuff about like Zoom getting so much traffic, and now they're kind of in trouble because they weren't ready for this type thing, and now they're under the spotlight because this is people's social interaction. My mom had her 73rd birthday yesterday, and it's one of those things that it's like I felt bad for her, but she's adjusted. She's like, nah, I mean, this is what it is. I wave to the neighbors, I say hi when I get the mail, and yada yada yada, but this is normal. I mean, has anyone else experienced that? Whether you're listening on the feed or you guys are on, the three of you guys, I don't know what your normal, and Dustin says, happy birthday, Dorothy Crane. Absolutely. But I don't know if anyone else has experienced that. The one thing I actually have enjoyed about all of this is that when I think about the strength of community, is that neighbors are talking to neighbors again. And, I helped a neighbor over here unload their car because he had bought a grill. But he's like, hey, do you have a mask? I was like, no, I don't have a mask. He's like, hey, we got one for you. And so the wife was making masks for people, so he gave us 2. And it's like I've waved to him and all that stuff. But have you guys is anyone else experiencing the strength of community that when it comes and we haven't cursed on this and we always get the explicit, but when shit hits the fan, it's like when it gets to that point, people actually at first they're looking at each other kind of like side-eyed, but then when it comes down to it, they actually are. They start opening up again. Has anyone else experienced this?
Yeah, I would say, I know when I come in during the day and people are bringing lunch to the people that are working the bottling line, and just the response that I hear when I'm out and about, or, Greg, like the people that have sent in letters and emails, it's been really, really great in terms of people coming together.
And just talking what you were talking about with people in the neighborhood, we see more people walking and people that we've been here in this house for 10 years, and there's people walking by that we're like, never seen half of these people. Who are these people? Where they come from? And you guys just moved in? No, we've been here for 8 years. Why? Right. Well, all right. Well, something really cool kind of happened on our street today. Our neighbor had organized this 4-piece jazz band to come for a birthday, for his wife's birthday, but it was a few weeks back, and they had to cancel because of all the stuff. Well, they ended up coming over today, and he sent everyone a text. So at 4:00, they came and they just played in the front yard. And all the neighbors were in their respective front yards, we're all outside. And these guys just played for a little bit. And it was kind of like cool. And, just to be outside and have people talking. And even though we were like keeping our distance, just everybody's at home during the day. We're all there. And so it was kind of a neat experience. And like you said, it's a different feel when you're in the. It's a
good feel though. I mean, this is
a great feel.
Last week where I had one last week where I was sitting right where I am right now, smoking a cigar, and all of a sudden I just hear a bunch of car horns, and I'm like, where the hell are all these car horns coming from? And I start looking around. I'm like, I think they're coming from my street. So I opened my, the gate to my backyard. I start walking towards the front, and I realize that there's a kid that lives 2 houses down. It's his birthday.
Yeah.
And you have a bunch of people driving down the street honking their horns. And like me being the guy I am, I'm thinking almost like Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino. I'm like, why the hell are all these people honking their horns? Like, shut up. Oh, wait. My bad.
Nate's got one hand on his firearm as he's walking shit out. I'd be like across the street. There was a 21st birthday, and I feel bad for the girl because it's like 21st birthday. This is a big deal, right? And sure enough, they had the whole thing, and they had cars coming in, and you know, all the friends are doing the whole social distancing, and they're doing all. I mean, it's like, but yeah, before, if I got a bunch of kids out here in front of my house, you know, on a typical day, I'm gonna be like, all right, move on, come on, move along. I feel like that's the attitude of a lot of people. They're like, why are you honking on my street? Why are you near me? You know, get off my lawn is what I thought you were going to say, Nate, about the Clinton. You know what I mean? Like, get off my lawn. And now it's just like, hey, how are you? Yeah. Can I get you something to drink while you're out there walking on my lawn? I just feel like the strength is coming back. And there's, I don't know what you guys think. I think there's something that coming out of this, much like you guys will eventually, I assume, stop producing hand sanitizer when the need is not there anymore, so you can focus on your core business. But I hope that things don't get lost when things come out of this, right? So, you know, 12 months from now, 18 months from now, 5 years from now, something in our generation that's alive on this earth right now, that they retain a little bit of this sense of community, that the fact that most of the time leading up to this, a lot of things were taken for granted, and that was other people, I think, was the biggest thing, is that people just don't want to be bothered. When you go on Yelp, most places, Yelp is all negative. I mean, it's just that's who gets on and does reviews. I mean, you guys in the business you're in, I hope you get positive ones. But I mean, to have like a 4 out of 5 rating as a business, you are winning. 3.5 out of 5, you feel okay about it. But it's like most of the time, there's that negativity that it's interesting. I think that has faded. Do you guys see that leaving? Do you guys see that staying true for a while, or just about the fact that it's as soon as you get back out in the world, it's like, on the other side of it is stay 6 feet away from me, I get off my lawn.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is going to be it is an event that will impact everybody that's going through it. And will we go back to more like everybody get off my lawn? We'll revert back to that a little bit, I think. Yeah, but I think this is definitely going to make an impression and change the way we think. And I think it's already doing that. And you know, we're going to adjust and we're going to adapt. And I think it's all the good things that are happening because we are at home and because we're walking down the street and because we're stopping and talking to our neighbors. We won't lose that. That's real, and that's going to stick with us. One of the things that I think goes right with what you're saying is my wife today, after we had the little concert on the street, she and my oldest son went and they did a drive-by honking birthday, kind of like you're talking. And so two things. We were busy from 4 until like 5:05, and she came back and we're like getting ready for dinner, and she's like, "Man, I feel like I had a really busy day today." Right. And it's just like, and she stopped and she's like, "It's crazy that that's the perspective, but I think that's why you have so much time to talk, because we're not so scheduled." And she said in that moment, "I think when this is done, maybe we don't schedule as crazy as we were before." And so I think we'll schedule more than we're doing now, but we won't maybe revert right back to where it's just craziness every weekend, every night, something. And I think we'll learn, and we're learning to appreciate these moments just with our neighbors on the street more so than we ever have.
Well, I think going into this, a lot of people were talking about how obviously there were two things that are going to happen. There's going to be a baby boom after this, right? So they talked about that part of it, and there's also going to be a spike in the divorce rate as well. And I think that is a commentary that coming out of this,
forced one way or the other, right?
Yeah, we're both, right? It's going to be messy going forward, but I think that after the initial, like the fact that this has gone on long enough, everyone had their ups and downs. And last week when we had Alan Rubin from Alec Bradley on, you know, we had a couple guys, Sean and Shane, that were talking about how, you know, we flirted with the subject of depression and everything else. I think that this is something that the great reminder is that, open up your doors, walk out see who's walking by, you know, open it back up. And once you get past that initial shock, to your point, Greg, about the fact that you may not book as heavy in the schedule, that's one of the reasons that it's such a shock that it's like, wait, I'm home with you and you and you, and you're like looking around at your family of all like maybe 3 hours a day, maybe.
Maybe
That's how this works.
Yeah.
But coming out of it, you might actually want to spend more time together. It's shocking, I know.
Well, I've been sitting there, and I'm not making a political statement at all, but one of the things you've heard talked about is, with all this going on, the importance of, buying made in America. Well, when you're talking about the community, I think with all this, we're seeing the importance of supporting local businesses, especially when it comes to people in the restaurant industry. Steve, you've alluded to it in episodes before, right, about, if you want to order from DoorDash or something, or, you want to order from a local restaurant, don't just order it through DoorDash or Grubhub or something like that. Like, actually go to that restaurant, because when you leave a tip, you're leaving a tip then to that restaurant employee rather than leaving a tip to the DoorDash or the Grubhub person. Like, start thinking more, your community and supporting your community. And, I know in the time that we've been home, there's only been, I think, Chick-fil-A and one other restaurant that's a giant corporate restaurant that we've maybe ordered food from. Everything else has been something local. So I think that's one of the things that you're starting to see with this is people are supporting the local businesses, because they know those people are the ones hardest hit by this, because it tugs on you a little bit more when it's someone close to you versus a giant corporate chain of whatever it is, whether it be a restaurant or a grocer or anything like that. Like, people are wanting to support more local now, I think, because of all this going on. And I'm hoping that once all this starts to ease back and we get into what we considered a normal lifestyle before this, like, people will still have that mindset of supporting the local, the people in their community.
Yeah.
I think there's a balance there, right? So, I mean, there's obviously, like, going into this whole thing was interesting, because, like, the Amazon of the world, right? That's the new corporate, right? So you don't even want to go out to get groceries anymore. You don't even want to leave your house to do this. You're too busy. And I know, like, Greg, you mentioned, like, you may not book as heavy, and I think that might do it. But you guys are a local business, obviously on the restaurant and bar side, but obviously the core of the business, if I'm not mistaken, is stuff that you don't need to have people nearby. You can ship the booze anywhere. This is something you don't need to have. Like, yeah, it's the identity. Come in and check it out. Like, the sense of community is one of your core values, which is something that's transitioned. But I think there's a balance to what you were saying, Nate, is that if you want to have a place to go get Mexican food when this is all over and sit down and have margaritas, you want to sit down in a bar, you want to go out to a store and just walk around and do nothing. This is what you're doing with your off time. You got to get off Amazon. You actually have to support some of these people, and because there will be a rude awakening if we go the other way, and then the people won't be there. They won't have anywhere to go, and they're going to be like, "What happened? Why did they shut down?" It's like, when was the last time that you actually ordered something, or the last time you went to a grocery store? When was the last time you went to? I mean, even some of the corporate ones. When was the last time you went to Target? Well, I just order online, but I wanted to go in there and return it. And you're like, this is not how the world works. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just a depot there. Go ahead, Greg.
No, I was going to say, Nate hit on something that I don't know if most, it's probably worth restating. I don't know if most people quite understand it, but I know some restaurants that are still open during this and doing takeout food, and it makes a huge impact if you drive there and you pick it up from the restaurant.
Absolutely.
And I know Grubhub and Uber Eats and those places are good and it's convenient, but we all have time right now. If you're getting from a local restaurant, the difference that it makes if you go in and get it there is gigantic. And I don't want people to do stuff that they don't feel safe doing, but most of these places will bring it out to your car, deliver it, give it to you, and it's safe, and they're taking care to make sure they're sanitizing stuff. But certainly, if you can do it that way, these restaurants they're not making money. They're losing money staying open, but maybe losing a little bit less than if they close completely. But every little dollar helps. And so I think it's something huge. if you can get out there and drive, and then like they said, keep any tip you put on there goes to the restaurant, goes to their staff, and certainly they're not paying that 20% or whatever it is to the service. So.
Well, hell, it's a way to get out of the house too, by the way.
Totally. Like you're gonna feel. I tell you what, driving around feels like the most normal thing. Like you don't have to wear your mask when you're driving in your car. It's just you and the car, and you feel like close to normal. The roads are a little empty, but
there are times where I felt like where traffic laws didn't apply anymore because there's so few cars out on the road nowadays.
Right.
Yeah, even my mom, like I said, who had a birthday, like 73 years old, I talked to her and I was like, so what'd you do? And she's like, well, I took the car out for about an hour. And like, she's got that old mentality, right? Like, obviously you don't want to sit for like a month, but she has that like old mentality, right? Where it's like, a car built in like the 60s. Like if you don't run that thing like every other day, like rotting, you got to take it to mechanics. But she's like, well, I hadn't turned it on for about 3 days. So I went for about an hour drive around Westerville. And like, good.
Right.
You buckled up, and I'm glad you got out, got some fresh air. Did you roll the window down? She's like, no, I didn't roll the window down. I'm like, yeah, you roll the window down a little bit, crack it at least,
Yeah.
I had a question for Anne. So you've worked for other companies, prior to you coming on to Watershed. You said you came on to Watershed back in September. So you've only been with that company, for 7-8 months, give or take. Like, how does it make you feel when you've seen Watershed make some of the changes and some of the decisions that they've made, given everything that's going on now? Like, how do you feel about the company you work for making those decisions to do what they can nowadays?
Oh, sold out super fan.
She has to say that I'm on.
I
know.
Greg, go away for a couple minutes.
All right, I'll take my earbuds off.
No, it's. I cannot say, like, this has been crazy, but it's also been probably, like, in the history of my career in the liquor business, the most rewarding 4 weeks that I can remember.
That's awesome.
Because it is, Greg knows, like, every morning we're hopping on, like, okay, what's going on today? What do we need to do? Okay, you got this. It's like wartime, leadership, basically. So going through and everybody figuring out what needs to be done.
Do you find it more rewarding, work, with all this going on now versus like some of the other companies you've worked for before?
Well, it's tremendously rewarding, but at a smaller company, you just see more aspects of the business, and you understand more the impact that you make individually and that the team that you're on makes. And this is the part that we play. And if we don't do this part, this whole thing doesn't happen. And it's really hard to have that type of, I guess, to see like the part that you play in a larger organization and the significance. So it's totally different.
Well, I equate that back to what we're talking about, community, man, big city versus small city, small town. When you got people like you can't hide from the people, right? So even if you guys are doing things from afar, if you're going into the distillery, you're going to the office, there's a real easy way to be detached from people by not seeing them every day. When you are on top of everyone, you can't avoid the situation. You can't avoid that sense of family. You can't just stick to your office, close your door, and be like, all right, I'll clock out at 5. No, you're in it, man. You're in it together. I love that. I absolutely love that. The sense of community that you guys have brought to the table tonight, and just in general. And I think it translates. That's why you guys are getting so much attention, and I appreciate you guys being a part of us tonight. This is such a cool episode to have you guys on in the midst of all this stuff, and the things that you guys are doing is just so impactful, so powerful. And I think you guys realize it, but I assume, and I'm making assumptions here, that so far you haven't really, you guys have said you appreciate it, but when we're all said and done, you get back to the daily grind, if you will, you're going to look back and just be like, holy cow, I cannot believe we did that. And you guys should definitely take a time to appreciate that and reflect and celebrate. Have another holiday party when we're done with this.
Right. We need a party.
In
Yes.
September, that might be it.
Social distance
Yeah.
party.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I do want to wrap up part 2, unless anyone has anything else. But going around closing remarks about the strength of community, we do this every week, just like we do the ratings 1 out of 10. But I mean, just any closing remarks that you guys have. Nate, go ahead if you want to start there.
So, I wish you wouldn't have had me go first, but all right.
That's why I did it.
No, I'm really hopeful because I've seen, our household with everything going on. Like we've always supported some of the local businesses, but with all this going on, we've started to support local businesses more. So like, my wife and I, we don't typically eat out, but now if we do eat out, we're finding something local. We're ordering something from a local restaurant to carry out or have delivered instead of something corporate. But at the same time, I also think, and it's something that without the job I have at AEP, I wouldn't have known. Like, not every fast food restaurant is owned by the corporate parent company. So like there is someone that owns a McDonald's that they own that McDonald's. That's it. Right. That's their business. There's someone that owns a Chick-fil-A and that's their business. Yes, it's part of a giant corporate name, but the person who actually owns that store, that's their livelihood. So just because it's a corporate doesn't necessarily mean that there's not an individual tied to that. And even thinking about, some of the corporate restaurants, there are still individuals that work at that restaurant.
That's a very good point.
That live in your community. So, during all this, you may want to think, yes, support local, but sometimes local may not, be a one shop restaurant. It may be something that has a chain. People that work there, they're local. They have a job only at that restaurant, whether it be a McDonald's, a Wendy's, a Burger King, a Taco Bell, a Kroger. Kroger's a giant chain, but the people that work at the Kroger by my house, that's their job. They work at that Kroger. So
great point, man.
So while I'm maybe supporting a giant corporation, I'm supporting the people that work at that restaurant. We have Dustin, who's been managing a lot of the live feed. He's a manager for a Kroger store, but he works at one store. Yeah. If his store doesn't perform, then that reflects negatively on him and his employees. So I'm amazed at how much, what it took to get us to the point where now we start actually realizing the value of our local businesses, and not just local business, but the people that work at those businesses. And it's a shame that it took something as severe as this pandemic and being locked in for us to realize just how important the people that work at all these different, businesses around us are. I just hope that when we come out of this, we still feel that sense of community, that we want to support those people that work and live in our neighborhood.
Yeah. You really buckled under pressure there, bud. that was really good. That was
good job.
Yeah, that was really good, man. That's why I pushed you. Yeah. Anne, any closing remarks from you?
They'll be quick, but maybe sort of quick.
Take the time you need.
I would say, and I've said this to friends throughout this, is that this has been unprecedented and horrible. And at the same time, there have been these amazing blessings that have come out of it. So I'm a mom to a 17-year-old, a junior in high school. And there is no way that I would ever be spending this much time with a 17-year-old, and
Right.
it has been an absolute joy. And reconnecting with friends from college and actually meeting our neighbors and coming together as a team and finding ways like, this is my part and this is what I can do to help. So yes, it's been horrible, but I see every day like people making the best possible decisions and the best thing they can do. And so there's blessings in the ugly.
Such a great perspective on that. I mean, I agree 100%. That's so great.
Yeah.
How about you, Greg? Any remarks from you?
Yeah, so I'm going to focus more just on the Columbus community and less about what we're going through at the moment. Even though I know that's such a big thing. For me, I grew up in Columbus, and I moved away from here right after college. As we talked about, I lived in Switzerland for a couple of years, and then my wife and I lived in North Carolina for 3 years, and then we came back to Columbus. And when we came back here, we thought, well, we'll be here for a few years and then we'll move on. We're going to go live in Chicago, and we're going to live in New York City, and
Go big time.
Go big time. And as soon as we got back to Columbus, we hadn't been here a month, and we looked at each other and said, this is where we belong. Like, we love it here. We love the people. We love the community. I love how proud Columbus is of Columbus. I love how much Columbus supports its own. We love what we do here. We love the people here. People here are genuinely nice people in Columbus. And I'm not saying there aren't other places that are like that, but there's a lot of places that aren't. And
it's like a big small town.
Yeah, it is. And so for me, being part of this community, whether we're on top of the world or we're in the middle of this crisis, I know the people here are going to support each other. I know we're going to work hard to get out of it. I know when we get through this thing, everyone's going to have each other's backs, and we're going to have some good times. And it's just, I don't know, it feels like it feels like family, even though it is a big city. I see different players in the city and what they do and what they bring to the table and how much they care. People are waiting for 2 hours in our line to get hand sanitizer, and they're thanking us, and they're buying it from us, and they're thanking us for making it, and so thankful when they get up there. A lot of support. That doesn't happen in most places. And so I don't know. I love this town. I love being a part of it. I love that in some small way, we get to help be a part of its history, whether that's making booze or serving them dinner. And right now we're making a little hand sanitizer. Hopefully we get back to dinner and booze real soon.
No, I think that's great, and I hope you guys do too. I hope obviously everyone's looking for some normalcy, and I think we're a ways out on that part of it. But no, I agree with all you guys. I think this is important that we learn some lessons here on as far as community goes. It's something that as we walked into this, like I said already, I think there's so many things that people take for granted. I mean, that's human nature, right? We talk about we had a technology episode not too long ago, and the fact that we're doing this right now and everyone is able to communicate during this time. It wasn't that long ago that if we were on stay-at-home order, this didn't exist, right? So this is another thing we take for granted. And I mean, we talk about the first responders, and we talked a lot about that. And I absolutely 100% agree. I mean, they are really out there taking the brunt of a lot of this stuff. And that was one that we talked about on this episode, is that there's a lot of other people you need to thank out there, and it's just everyone, the people that are staying at home, the people that are the IT people that are making sure that we can do something like this, or just to have a phone call on your cell phone to your mom on your birthday, or do a video chat. I mean, these are the things that we are already still taking for granted. This is not just something that exists because we were born. I mean, these are people's efforts. And I think that coming out of this, a strength of community that I really hopefully look forward to is that it's a branch off of what you guys are doing. I think the whiskey community, I think of the cigar community, a cigar shop, if you guys have ever been in one, it is something that if you are in there once, you probably will go back because you met at least one new person. And then you go back in again and you see that person again. And now you're learning about, just like this podcast, you learn more about these people as the time goes on. And I go back to a previous career of mine, and I always use this this metaphor, but it's a prime example. Right now, if you had to move a sofa in your house, who are you calling? You're not calling your high school friends. You're not calling your family because they're not close typically. And sadly enough, you're probably not even knocking on your neighbor's door. They are right next door to you. This is the community. No, you're calling a friend from work. You're calling a kid's parents. Kids' parents that you know is on the same soccer team as you. That you're like, hey, you can handle it in a sofa, whatever. But I hope we come out of this and it's something that you could actually knock on your neighbor's door again. I know that's reminiscent of past times, but I think this is something that, like Greg, you said, it's like you're seeing people walking down the street and you're like, who the hell is that person?
Where did they come from?
And you transition from get off my lawn to go back to the 50s. Hey, you need a glass of lemonade or something like that. I mean, maybe that's a little bit too poetic, but it's like, hopefully there's something in between here in about, 2025 when we're all back. And
right.
Like, hey, you remember back in 2020 when things were really messed up? Yeah. I haven't talked to my neighbors since. I don't want that to happen.
Right.
So I hope that everyone carries this forward and the lessons that we've learned from all this stuff. And guys, I thank you guys for being a part of it. I do want to thank our sponsors, Tinder Box at Easton, Altadis USA, and BS Cigar Company, and Watershed Distillery. You guys, you have a new fan in me, and it sounds like from the feed, you have a lot of new fans out there that we hope to get out there and do. We'd love to do a podcast maybe from the distillery when this all gets back to normal.
Yes, we would love to have you. And thank you guys for having us on tonight.
Awesome.
It's been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Guys, cheers. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. Appreciate it. Guys, stay safe, happy, and healthy. Take care of each other and enjoy the strength of community. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.